I'm a bad motherfucker.
Greetings, Earthlings, hominids of Zio's slave planet Earth. Shalom from my home, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. This is a wonderful mitzvah. And welcome all to our Shabbat stream. This is our Shabbat stream where we delve into all things Ashkenazim. Super brain fighting, combating terror in all its evil ways, shapes, and forms. We talk about the increased capacity in the occipital lobes that obviously permits us to engage in vast evil, deceit, deception, murder, rape, brutality, and of course, the piece de resistance. Genocide. Show the Goyim no mercy. That's our motto. Hey, Maury, do you see all the Zio bots on X celebrating the cancellation of Defund Israel Now? They're all loving it up. Why do you think that is, folks? What group celebrates censorship like God's chosen psychopaths? Can we open the floor for a discussion on that? Who are the architects and the authors of cancel culture, political correctness, right? Blacklisting. Oh no, that was used against them, Bert, in the McCarthy hearings. The Committee on Un-American Activities, there was a witch hunt to get rid of all those nice Jewish Hollywood producers that were communists. Oh, you stupid sheeple. They call you cattle for a very good reason, do they not? And they rub your nose in it, right? What do they fear? Why, oh, why do they celebrate cancel culture? Why, oh, why do they give their people booklets, rebuttal booklets, to go and combat so-called anti-Semites, right, with these talking points? Why do they have to pay influencers handsomely to carry their water when we're all just trying to struggle, scrape, and get by telling the truth? You know, it's crystal clear for anyone with just a modicum of discernment capacity to see through this bullshit. But they have successfully imposed this fucking kosher matrix upon you, right? This artificial reality. You're supposed to, the waterworks are supposed to come on while you're watching Steven Spielberg's magnus opus, right? Schindler's List. And you're supposed to have an outpouring of empathy because you're human, right? And everybody can relate with and sympathize with the suffering of other humans. But have you noticed that there's a complete absence of any empathy, sympathy, or compassion for the suffering of the Palestinians? Not only that, not only is there no compassion, no sympathy for their suffering, but they revel in it. They absolutely revel in it. They're making TikTok videos and uploading shit on X where they're celebrating. They're actually celebrating the situation, the horrible genocidal condition that the Palestinians are fucking enduring through, that are suffering through. How? Why? What? People can't understand this for a very good reason. We're not wired this way. We're not wired for this. So when we talk about censorship, what's going on with Elon Musk, he went over there, he kissed the ring. Can you name me one? I'll settle for one. Just one. Can you name me one Jewish Zionist account that's been suspended from X for violating its rules? I'll wait. Just name me one. One is all I need. Now, do you think that Elon or whatever, the fucking rules people, compliance, whatever the fuck they are, safety, whatever this department is in X, do you think that they will address this? Do you think they'll ever provide us a spreadsheet of Zionist accounts that have been suspended and pro-Palestinian accounts that have been suspended? Do you think perhaps it might be one-sided? I can't name one. If someone out there does know of a singular one, that's all we're asking for. One account. One account. How can this be? Bert, what are you saying? Elon Musk is a champion of free speech. He saved free speech online. He brought back all the suspended accounts. Yeah, that was that. Now, what's the goal here, Elon? What are we shooting for? What's the destination? A philo-Semitic Zionist echo chamber, where all that's left are the Jews and their lies. And what do you think that destination will yield? You think you'll be able to maintain your guerrilla, top of the heap, number one social media platform on planet Earth? You think that's how it's going to go? Or don't you think the only fucking reason you are the gorilla right now in terms of the metrics and the eyeballs, right, is because you did restore a modicum of free speech to X? And if you go down that road, if you go back, put it in reverse like you're doing, and going back and taking that wrong turn on the Jack Dorsey road, where he did cede authority to the ADL minders and did as they fucking, commanded. Don't you think that this level is going to dissipate? You're going to max out, hit the ceiling, plateau, and then go right back down. And what? Then you're going to be indistinguishable from Instagul or Facebook, which are philo-Semitic Zionist echo chambers. And what do? Why does organized world Jewry hate free speech so much? Why does organized world Jewry love censorship and cancel culture so much? I want to put it out there, and I want your feedback. And I'm going to play a little something, I'm going to do a little shim sham. I'm going to do a little song and dance, and it's going to be entertaining. And of course, we're going to bust balls. That's what we do here. We bust balls. And Gad Saad, where are you? Professor of 30 years at Cornell University. I wish just one. I just wish that just one so-called anti-Semite would come and explain to me. I've come to you, and I want to explain to you, and I've picked up this mantle, this challenge, but you're nowhere to be found. Open invite to God Saad, Zionist operative, professor of psychology, and See, the reason why people question your academic bona fides, Saad, Gad, is because you engage in Sith level projection, obfuscation, and deceit. Oh, but Bert, how can you say that? He's a well-respected man, and Elon Musk follows and likes many of his tweets. Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Hey, Elon, no need to aspire any longer. You're fully Jewish. Yeah, because every time I see that, an account like Low Key or Defund Israel Now or Stop Zionist Hate or any of these other litany of pro-Palestinian accounts get censored, I think to myself, this tastes like matzah on a Shabbos evening. Elon Musk, you're too cool for shul. I want more matzah and that Shabbos feeling. It's so wonderful and dark. Breathe me in, breathe me out. I don't know if I could ever go without. Oh, Yagavot, oh, Yagavot, oh, Yagavot. Now, all you Muslims and you Jews, we're gonna make all of yous change your evil point of view today. Oi, the agony. Oi, the shame. To make my privates public for a game. How could you do that, Elon? It's a great ashanda. Yeah, Elon went to Auschwitz with baby Ben Shapiro, and they finished his bris. And baby Ben got to come home with his balls in his pocket. It's absolutely fucking astonishing, and it's sickening. Don't claim to have a commitment to free speech while you engage in grotesque censorship. Oh, you didn't see this coming, Elon? You didn't see this coming? Please. Everybody know the true Israelites was black, motherfucker. And they was Ethiopians and shit. Yeah, we gotta get a black Hebrew Israelite on the space. I think that's probably the only group that has, as of yet, not been represented. And let's see, are they showing my space? I don't see it. I don't see my space, Elon. Why aren't you showing my space? Oh, wait, I just saw it. Oh yeah, there I am. Yeah. Anybody out there have any thoughts? Why do they fear the free marketplace of ideas? Why do they fear free speech? Why can't we have a dialogue? Why can't we engage in debate? Why do they make the highest levels of kosher poop whenever we want to talk about anything that they want to obfuscate? There's a very good reason you have a kosher sanitized history book. There's a very good reason you're on the fucking Zio plantation. And that all you see and read and hear is what they want you to see, read, and hear. Right? And even with all of this control, even with all of these platforms in their pockets, and the dissemination of all this information, which is nothing but lies and deceit. Even with all that, pouring tremendous resources into maintaining this artificial matrix, they're losing control of the narrative. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unhear what you've heard. And it's happening. And to say that they're concerned would be probably one of the grossest understatements you could make. It's real. It's happening. Now, we have to plan for the eventuality that they're going to get their way, that Elon's going to go full Jack Dorsey, right? What we need is someone committed with a sincere commitment to free speech, not a Shabbos goy. We got plenty of those fucking guys running around. Brother B in the house. Hello.
Yes, this is Brother B in the house, aka Brian. How's everybody? How are you, Albert?
I'm well, brother. I'm well.
All right. Peace and blessings. Yeah. Well, first, with the whole Schindler's List, the funniest Seinfeld episode ever is when he got caught making out in the movies with during Schindler's List. It was a big ashanda in the community. I don't know if you ever seen that episode with Seinfeld. There's an episode where he takes his girl to see Schindler's List, and he gets, someone sees him making out in there, one of his relatives, and it was a big ashanda in the community. His mother and his father. You were making
sure it was a humiliation.
Yeah, you were making out during Schindler's List, oy vey.
Right.
Put an ashanda. But so I thought that was funny. But well, first of all, I'm gonna start out with a joke. Well, hopefully I don't hear crickets, but all right, so check it out. So if the Flintstones had a messianic figure during their episodes, what would they call this messianic figure?
Don't know. Go ahead.
The Moshe Rock.
There you go. Good job. Good job. Moshe Rock. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, because everything is either stone or rock or whatever. But anyhow, yesterday, I was listening to your stream and I got a notification. Adam was live streaming the David Icke. Alex Jones had David Icke on, right? So I had you on I was in a dilemma, so I had you on the tablet and I had him on the phone. So I had, so I heard there's this guy who called up, Adrian Pittman, I think was his name. Dude, it sounded like Elon Musk. Everybody was saying, "Is that Elon?" You got if you get a chance, go back and check that out. He had it on the Space too, because it was on Twitter Spaces. Alex Jones was streaming, was spacing it out, and yeah, it was he was just him, and it was like, talk about three assets, three controlled. I mean, it was. I mean, I've known David Icke for a long time, and a lot of the stuff he said way back in the '90s and stuff. It's like, he might have had some inside information or whatever, but I unfortunately I got to look at the other side of the coin, because I remember back in 2003, Jesse Ventura had the show Conspiracy Theory, and I was a big fan. And he had Alex Jones was a contributor to that show, and Alex Jones brought David Icke on the show, and Jesse was investigating the lizard theory and all of this, and I mean, so I know he's compromised. At one time, all my heroes are compromised. Gene Simmons.
I heard Jesse don't have time to bleed.
Yeah, he don't have time to bleed. He needs to change his tampon. But yeah, I mean, I was a big Jesse. I was a wrestling fan when I was a kid and stuff. He was like,
dude, the body, Jesse, the body with his fucking drop dead shades on and his boas, dude.
Yeah, he was cool.
That guy was an awesome wrestler in terms of because he's got a higher IQ, right? He's a smart guy, and he had that physical presence.
He was like the anti-Hulk Hogan. Like, if you know anything about wrestling, you're up from that area, so you probably know. Like,
he was a heel. He was a heel. Like 90% of his career, he was a heel.
Oh yeah, Jesse and Hulk Hogan both stole their persona from superstar Billy Graham. If you remember him back in the day, like
Dude,
yeah,
superstar Billy Graham is my number one favorite wrestler of all time.
mine too, brother.
Yeah,
He's the one that coined the brother. That whole so many people stole his stuff.
They all stole from superstar Billy Graham. Ric
Dusty
Flair,
Rhodes
Jesse
stole from him.
Ventura, Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan. They all ripped their shit off the superstar. The superstar.
Yeah, I eat T-bone steaks and I lift metal plates. But anyhow, so that was funny.
Yes.
But, yeah. So anyhow, so yeah. So he had, so Jesse. All my heroes, like I used to like Howard Stern. He turned out to be a freaking vaccine shill. Gene Simmons, I was a big Kiss fan growing up, and I found out, he's definitely, from the tribe, and
hang in there long enough, and every single one of them will let you down.
Yes,
that's the moral of the story here.
It is. Even Jesse, man. So anyhow, so Jesse had so these guys known each other. This shell game, this whatever controlled op has been going on a long time because Jesse, had Alex Jones and David Icke, and they did the whole now the whole thing with David Icke, like he gets a lot of beef about his reptilian thing, but he did a presentation where he showed that there was some sort, like the snake in the Garden of Eden. That's just one, but he showed all these ancient civilizations had some sort of a reptilian reference in their backstory. So it was not.
This is true. This is true. Yeah. If you go to the origins, the first things that are worshipped are snakes or dragons and the sun. Yeah. Snakes or dragons, and what's a dragon but a winged serpent?
Yeah,
and the sun.
Yeah, so I mean, I remember my mom used to be into a bunch of woo.
And the Khazarians threw in phallus worship because they're fucking sickos.
Exactly. Yeah, he's a big proponent of the Sabbatean thing too. He thinks it's still the global cult. Like he won't come. Like a lot of people say, oh, when he's mentioning lizards, he means Jews. In a way, he kind of is, but he does the whole Sabbatean thing where that's his root of. He always mentions the global cult. Well, a couple books ago, he did come out with the. He explained what he meant by that because everybody, that's very vague. There's this global because he can't come right out and say it. So he's kind of an enigma. I kind of like some of the stuff he says.
Why can't he come out and say it, Brother B?
Well, he's been banned in Australia. He's got all his shows canceled unless he's like I always got to look at the other side of the coin. Are they doing that to make it look like he's, I don't, you know what I mean?
Why can't you talk about them honestly?
It's just taboo.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, but I just wanted to throw that out there. If you get a chance. Oh, and I sent you something I found maybe for another show when you do the whole. If you ever do the whole pedo thing again, I found a old news clip about Pizzagate. I sent it to your inbox.
All right, cool. Thanks, Bob.
All right, brother.
Yeah, man. All right, good job, B.
God bless.
So yeah, so David Icke's scared to say Jews, organized Jewry, and why is that? Because they don't want you talking about them unless you're heaping effusive praise and talking about how the disproportionate contributions they've made, how great they are, the innovations and the inventions, and all the wonderful work that they've done in terms of advancing civil rights and human rights. But that all blows up in their face when you talk about Palestine and Gaza. How do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile the tyranny and the oppression and the savagery exhibited in Palestine and claim that this group is advancing human rights, civil rights, human dignity, democracy, self-determination. Well, you cannot. You cannot. So they turn to their tools, their box of tools. And what do they love in their box of tools? The hammer to smash you, and censorship to muzzle you. They consider a fair fight you being blindfolded, gagged with your arms tied behind your back. That's what they consider a fair fight. And lying through omission, rewriting history. You know, the original, what you see in terms of history is biased, slanted revisionism. And if you want to revise the revisionist fake history, they call you a revisionist. Do you understand this level of control that they have? It's unbelievable. Unbelievable doesn't begin to explain it. So when we have people like Benjamin Friedman blowing the whistle, Marcus Eli Ravitch, Maurice Samuels, Israel Shahak, Gideon Levy, Gilad Atzmon, etc. When we have Jews that are honest, that are on our side, why? Because they realize that this is a pathologically deceitful, psychotic death cult, supremacist, genocidal, malevolent. And they wish to disassociate from that as any, normal, good, honest person would. So let's listen to the word. First of all, hold on a second here. Marcus Eli Ravitch was a Jewish American immigrant writer who wrote many books and articles about immigration in America and Europe between the world. Best known for his autobiographical book, An American in the Making. He's also known for the 1928 A Real Case Against the Jews. All right.
The first to see the possibilities of war by propaganda, Marcus Eli Ravitch. You Christians worry and complain about the Jews' influence in your civilization. We are, you say, an international people, a compact minority in your midst, with traditions, interests, aspirations, and objectives distinct from your own. And you declare that this state of affairs is a menace to your orderly development. It confuses your impulses. It defeats your purposes. It muddles up your destiny. I do not altogether see the danger. Your world has always been ruled by minorities, and it seems to me a matter of indifference what the remote origin and professed creed of the governing clique is. The influence, on the other hand, is certainly there, and it is vastly greater and more insidious than you appear to realize. That is what puzzles and amuses and sometimes exasperates us about your game of Jew baiting. It sounds so portentous. You go about whispering terrifyingly of the hand of the Jew in this and that and the other thing. It makes us quake. We are conscious of the injury we did you when we imposed upon you our alien faith and traditions. Suppose, we say tremblingly, you should wake up to the fact that your religion, your education, your morals, your 476 social, governmental, and legal systems are fundamentally of our making. And then you specify and talk vaguely of Jewish financiers and Jewish motion picture promoters, and our terror dissolves in laughter. The God we see with relief will never know the real blackness of our crimes. We cannot make it out. Either you do not know or you have not the courage to charge us with those deeds for which there's at least a shadow of evidence and which an intelligent judge and jury could examine without impatience. Why bandy about unconvincing trifles when you might so easily indict us for serious and provable offenses? Why throw up to us a patent and clumsy forgery such as the Protocols of the Elders of Zion when you might as well confront us with the revelation of Street John? Why talk about Marx and Trotsky when you have Jesus of Nazareth and Paul of Tarsus to confound us with? You call us subverters, agitators, revolution mongers. It is the truth, and I cower at your discovery. It could be shown with only the slightest straining and juggling of the facts that we have been at the bottom of all the major revolutions in your history. We undoubtedly had a sizable finger in the Lutheran Rebellion, and it is simply a fact that we were the prime movers in the bourgeois democratic revolutions of the century before the last, both in France and America.
Yeah. Unbelievable, right? Unbelievable. This is another must listen, must read, right? The Commissary to the Gentiles by Marcus Eli Ravage. If this is the first you've ever heard of this guy, do yourself a favor, get familiar.
We did not know our own interests, but you point accusing finger at us and charge us with these heinous and recorded crimes? Not at all. We lay at our door the recent Great War and the upheaval in Russia, which have done not only the most injury to the Jews themselves, but which a schoolboy could have foreseen would have that result. But even these plots and revolutions are as nothing compared with the great conspiracy which we engineered at the beginning of this era, and which was destined to make the creed of a Jewish sect the religion of the Western world. The Reformation was not designed as purely. It squared us with an ancient enemy and restored our Bible to its place of honor in Christendom. The Republican revolutions of the 18th century freed us of our age-long political and social disabilities. They benefited us, but they did you no harm. On the contrary, they prospered and expanded you. You owe your preeminence in the world to them. But the upheaval which brought Christianity into Europe was, or at least may easily be shown to have been, planned and executed by Jews as an act of revenge against a great Gentile state. And when you talk about Jewish conspiracies, I cannot for the world understand why you do not mention the destruction of Rome and the whole civilization of antiquity concentrated under her banners at the hands of Jewish Christianity. It is unbelievable, but you Christians do not seem to know where your religion came from.
Boom! Boom! Listen, he's dropping megaton truth bombs. You Christians have no idea where your religion came from. They brought it on as a revenge to destroy Rome. And guess what happened, guys? Guess what happened in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries and 5th centuries in the final collapse? As the great pagan Roman Empire was collapsing, Christianity was rising. Now, do you think that's a coincidence?
How, nor why. Your historians, with one great exception, do not tell you the documents in the case, which are part of your Bible, you chant over but do not read. We have done our work too thoroughly. You believe our propaganda too implicitly. The coming of Christianity is to you not an ordinary historical event growing out of other events of the time. It is the fulfillment of a divine Jewish prophecy, with suitable amendments of your own. It did not, as you see it, destroy a great Gentile civilization and a great Gentile empire with which Jewry was at war. It did not plunge mankind into barbarism and darkness for 1,000 years. It came to bring salvation to the Gentile world. Yet here, if ever, was a great subversive movement, hatched in Palestine, spread by Jewish agitators, financed by Jewish money, taught in Jewish pamphlets and broadsides, at a time when Jewry and Rome were in a death struggle, and ending in the collapse of the great Gentile empire. You do not even see it, though an intelligent child, unbefuddled by theological magic, could tell you what it is all about after a hasty reading of this simple record, and then you go on prattling of Jewish conspiracies and cite as instances the Great War and the Russian Revolution. Can you wonder that we Jews have always taken your anti-Semites rather lightly, as long as they did not resort to violence? And, mind you, no less an author, even Gibbon long ago tried to enlighten you. It is now a century and a half since the decline and fall of the Roman Empire let the cat out of the bag. Gibbon, not being a parson dabbling in history, did not try to account for the end of a great era by inventing fatuous nonsense about the vice and degradation of Rome, about the decay of morals and faith in an empire which was at that very time in the midst of its most glorious creative period. How could he? He was living in the Augustan age in London, which, in spite of nearly 2,000 years since the coming of Christian salvation, was as good a replica of August in Rome in the matter of refined lewdness as the Foggy Islanders could make it. No, Gibbon was a race-conscious Gentile and an admirer of the culture of the pagan West, as well as a historian with brains and eyes. Therefore he had no difficulty laying his finger on the malady that had rotted and wasted away the noble edifice of anti-civilization. He put Christianity down, the law which went forth from Zion and the word of God from Jerusalem, as the central cause of the decline and fall of Rome and all she represented. So far so good. But Gibbon did not go far enough. He was born and died, you see, a century before the invention of scientific anti-Semitism. He left wholly out of account the element of deliberation. He saw an alien creed sweeping out of the east and overwhelming the fair lands of the west. It never occurred to him that it was precisely to this destructive end that the whole scheme of salvation was dedicated. Yet the facts are as plain as you please. Let me in very brief recount the tale, unembroidered by miracle, prophecy, or magic. For a good perspective, I shall have to go back a space. The action conveniently falls into 4 parts, rising to a climax in the third. The time, when the first curtain rises, is roughly 65 BC. Dramatis persona, are, minor parts aside, Judea and Rome. Judea is a tiny kingdom off the eastern Mediterranean. For 5 centuries it has been hardly more than a geographical expression. Again and again it has been overrun and destroyed and its population carried into exile or slavery by its powerful neighbors. Nominally independent, it is now as unstable as ever and on the edge of civil war. The Empire of the West, with her nucleus in the city republic of Rome, while not yet mistress of the world, is speedily heading that way. She is acknowledged the one great military power of the time, as well as the heir of Greece and the center of civilization. Up to the present the 2 states have had little or no contact with one another. Then without solicitation on her part, Rome was suddenly asked to take a hand in Judean affairs. A dispute had arisen between 2 brothers over the succession to the petty throne, and the Roman general Pompey, who happened to be in Damascus winding up bigger matters, was called upon to arbitrate between the claimants. With the simple directness of a Republican soldier, Pompey exiled one of the brothers, tossed the chief priesthood to his rival, and abolished the kingly dignity altogether. Not to put too fine a point on it, Pompey's mediation amounted in effect to making Judea a Roman dependency. The Jews, not unnaturally perhaps, objected, and Rome, to conciliate them and to conform to local prejudice, restored the royal office. She appointed, that is, a king of her own choosing. He was the son of an excised man, an Idumean by race, named Herod. But the Jews were not placated, and continued making trouble. Rome thought it very ungrateful of them. All this is merely a prelude, and is introduced into the action to make clear what follows. Jewish discontent grew to disaffection and open revolt when their Gentile masters began importing into Jerusalem the blessings of Western culture. Graven images, athletic games, Greek drama, and gladiatorial shows were not to the Jewish taste. The pious resented them as an offense in the nostrils of Jehovah, even though the resident officials patiently explained they were meant for the entertainment and edification of the non-Jewish garrison. The Judeans resisted with especial strenuousness the advent of the efficient Roman tax gatherer. Above all, they wanted back a king of their own race and their own royal line. Among the masses the rebellion took the form of a revival of the old belief in a Messiah, a divinely appointed savior who was to redeem his people from the foreign yoke and make Judea supreme among the nations. Claimants to the mission were not wanting. In Galilee, one Judas led a rather formidable insurrection, which enlisted much popular support. John, called the Baptist, operated in the Jordan country. He was followed by another North Country man, Jesus of Nazareth. All 3 were masters of the technique of couching incendiary political sedition in harmless theological phrases. All 3 used the same signal of revolt. The time is at hand. And all 3 were speedily apprehended and executed, both Galileans by crucifixion. Personal qualities aside, Jesus of Nazareth was, like his predecessors, a political agitator engaged in liberating his country from the foreign oppressor. There is even considerable evidence that he entertained an ambition to become king of an independent Judea. He claimed, or his biographers later claimed for him, descent from the ancient royal line of David. But his paternity is somewhat confused. The same writers who traced the origin of his mother's husband back to the psalmist king also pictured Jesus as the son of Jehovah, and admitted that Joseph was not his father. It seems, however, that Jesus before long realized the hopelessness of his political mission and turned his oratorical gifts and his great popularity with the masses in quite another direction. He began preaching a primitive form of populism, socialism, and pacifism. The effect of this change in his program was to gain him the hostility of the substantial, propertied classes, the priests and patriots generally, and to reduce his following to the poor, the laboring mass, and the slaves. After his death these lowly disciples formed themselves into a communistic brotherhood. A sermon their late leader had once delivered upon a hillside summed up for them the essence of his teachings, and they made it their rule of life. It was a philosophy calculated to appeal profoundly to humble people. It comforted those who suffered here on earth with promised rewards beyond the grave. It made virtues of the necessities of the weak. Men without hope in the future were admonished to take no thought for the morrow. Men too helpless to resent insult or injury were taught to resist not evil. Men condemned to lifelong drudgery, indigents were assured of the dignity of labor and of poverty. The meek, the despised, the disinherited, the downtrodden were, in the hereafter, to be the elect and favored of God. The worldly, the ambitious, the rich and powerful were to be denied admission to heaven. The upshot, then, of Jesus' mission was a new sect in Judea. It was neither the first nor the last. Judea, like modern America, was a fertile soil for strange creeds. The Edianim, the paupers, as they called themselves, did not regard their beliefs as a new religion. Jews they had been born, and Jews they remained. The teachings of their master were rather in the nature of a social philosophy, an ethic of conduct, a way of life. To modern Christians, who never tire of asking why the Jews did not accept Jesus and his teachings, I can only answer that for a long time none but Jews did. To be surprised that the whole Jewish people did not turn Aryans is about as intelligent as to expect all Americans to join the Unitarians or the Baptists or the Christian Scientists. In ordinary times little attention would have been paid to the ragged brotherhood. Slaves and laborers for the most part, their meekness might even have been encouraged by the solider classes. But with the country in the midst of a struggle with a foreign foe, the unworldly philosophy took on a dangerous aspect. It was a creed of disillusion, resignation, and defeat. It threatened to undermine the morale of the nation's fighting men in time of war. This blessing of the peacemakers, this turning of the other cheek, this non-resistance, this love your enemy, looked like a deliberate attempt to paralyze the national will in a crisis.
You get it? You get it? Turn the other cheek, meekness, enslavement. You get this from how many sides do you need to see it? From an insider telling you, look, this was a psyop, right? It was a revenge plan. A revenge plan to decimate the Roman Empire. Now, we could debate on, was that the sole intent? Certainly not. Certainly not. But you can't deny and you can't debate the results. What are the results? Where are we in 2024, if not shackled into kosher servitude? I'm asking. Anybody out there? You got any thoughts?
A sure victory to the foe, so it is not surprising that the Jewish authorities began persecuting the Aryans. Their meetings were invaded and dispersed, their leaders were clapped into jail, their doctrines were proscribed. It looked for a while as if the sect would be speedily wiped out. Then, unexpectedly, the curtain rose on Act 3, and events took a sudden new turn. Perhaps the bitterest foe of the sectaries was one Saul, a maker of tents. A native of Tarsus and thus a man of some education in Greek culture, he despised the new teachings for worldliness and their remoteness from life. A patriotic Jew, he dreaded their effect on the national cause. A traveled man, versed in several languages, he was ideally suited for the task of going about among the scattered Jewish communities to counteract the spread of their socialistic pacifistic doctrines. The leaders in Jerusalem appointed him chief persecutor to the Aryans. Shelby FFPV commissary to Gentiles 481. He was on his way to Damascus one day to arrest a group of the sectaries when a novel idea came to him. In the quaint phrase of the book of Acts, he saw a vision. He saw as a matter of fact, too. He perceived, to begin with, how utterly hopeless were the chances of little Judea winning out in an armed conflict against the greatest military power in the world. Second, and more important, it came to him that the vagabond creed which he had been repressing might be forged into an irresistible weapon against the formidable foe. Pacifism, non-resistance, resignation, love were dangerous teachings at home. Spread among the enemy's legions, they might break down their discipline and thus yet bring victory to Jerusalem. Saul, in a word, was probably the first man to see the possibilities of conducting war by propaganda.
Did you catch that? Did you catch that? Pacifism, resignation, turn the other cheek, render unto Caesar. All of these key tenets in creating a slave theology. And he saw utility in that, but he was going to turn it around, right? And sell it to the Gentiles. And save the Jews, right? This is what Ravage is telling you.
Journey.
So he's basically explaining to you that he was a propagandist and on mission, tasked with what? Saving the Jews from this new cult and spreading it to the Gentiles. Double agent. The first crypto, well, not the first, one in a very long line of crypto Jews.
He journeyed on to Damascus, and there, to the amazement alike of his friends and of those he had gone to suppress, he announced his conversion to the faith and applied for admission to the Brotherhood. On his return to Jerusalem, he laid his new strategy before the startled elders of Zion. After much debate and searching of souls, it was adopted. More resistance was offered by the leaders of the Ebionim of the capital. They were distrustful of his motives, and they feared that his proposal to strip the faith of its ancient Jewish observances and practices so as to make it acceptable to Gentiles would fill the fraternity with alien half-converts and dilute its strength. But in the end, he won them over, too. And so Saul, the fiercest persecutor of Jesus' followers, became Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles, and so, incidentally, began the spread into the pagan lands of the West, an entirely new Oriental religion. Unfortunately for Paul's clan, the new strategy worked much too well. His revamped and rather learned theology made converts faster than he had dared hope, or than he even wished. His idea, it should be kept in mind, was at this stage purely defensive. He had as yet no thought of evangelizing the world. He only hoped to discourage the enemy. With that accomplished, and the Roman garrisons out of Palestine, he was prepared to call a truce. But the slaves and oppressed of the empire, the wretched conscripts, and the starving proletariat of the capital itself, found as much solace in the adapted Pauline version of the creed as the poor Jews before them had found in the original teachings of their crucified master. The result of this unforeseen success was to open the enemy's eyes to what was going on. Disturbing reports of insubordination among the troops began pouring into Rome from the army chiefs in Palestine and elsewhere. Instead of giving the imperial authorities pause, the new tactics only stiffened their determination. Rome swooped down upon Jerusalem with fire and sword, and after a fierce siege which lasted 4 years, she destroyed the nest of the agitation, 70 AD. At least she thought she had destroyed it. The historians of the time leave us in no doubt as to the aims of Rome. They tell us that Nero sent Vespasian and his son Titus with definite and explicit orders to annihilate Palestine and Christianity together. To the Romans, Christianity meant nothing more than Judaism militant, anyhow, an interpretation which does not seem far from the facts. As to Nero's wish, he had at least half of it realized for him. Palestine was so thoroughly annihilated that it has remained a political ruin to this day. But Christianity was not so easily destroyed. Indeed, it was only after the fall of Jerusalem that Paul's program developed to the full. Hitherto, as I have said, his tactic had been merely to frighten off the conqueror, in the manner of Moses plaguing the pharaohs. He had gone along cautiously and hesitantly, taking care not to arouse the powerful foe. He was willing to dangle his novel weapon before the foe's nose, and let him feel its edge, but he shrank from thrusting it in full force. Now that the worst had happened and Judea had nothing further to lose, flung scruples to the wind and carried the war into the enemy's country. The goal now was nothing less than to humble Rome as she had humbled Jerusalem, to wipe her off the map as she had wiped out Judea. If Paul's own writings fail to convince you of this interpretation of his activities, I invite your attention to his more candid associate John, where Paul, operating within the shadow of the imperial palace and half the time a prisoner in Roman jails, is obliged to deal in parable and veiled hints. John, addressing himself to disaffected Asiatics, can afford the luxury of plain speaking. At any rate, his pamphlet entitled Revelation is, in truth, a revelation of what the whole astonishing business is about. Rome, fancifully called Babylon, is minutely described in the language of sputtering hate as the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth, as the woman drunken with the blood of saints, Christians and Jews, as the oppressor of peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues, and, to remove all doubt of her identity, as that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. An angel triumphantly cries, Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen. Then follows an orgiastic picture of ruin. Commerce and industry and maritime trade are at an end. Art and music and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride are silenced. Darkness and desolation lie like a pall upon the scene. The gentle Christian conquerors wallow in blood up to the bridles of their horses. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. And what is the end and purpose of all this chaos and devastation? John is not too reticent to tell us, for he closes his prophecy with a vision of the glories of the new, that is, the restored, Jerusalem, not any allegorical fantasy, I pray you, but literally Jerusalem, the capital of a great reunited kingdom of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. Could anyone ask for anything pleaner? Of course, no civilization could forever hold out against this kind of assault. By the year 200, the efforts of Paul and John and their successors had made such headway among New York all classes of Roman society that Christianity had become the dominant cult throughout the empire. Meantime, as Paul had shrewdly foreseen, Roman morale and discipline had quite broken down, so that more and more the imperial legions, once the terror of the world and the backbone of Western culture, went down to defeat before barbarian invaders. In the year 326, the Emperor Constantine, hoping to check the insidious malady, submitted to conversion and proclaimed Christianity the official religion. It was too late. After him, the Emperor Julian tried to resort once more to suppression. But neither resistance nor concession were of any use. The Roman body politic had become thoroughly worm-eaten with Palestinian propaganda. Paul had triumphed. This at least is how, were I an anti-Semite in search of a credible sample of subversive Jewish conspiracy, I would interpret the advent of a modified Jewish creed into the Western world. New York Charles Norman syncopated city of the lonely blues, your avenues are dance halls for my gloating soul. Color and crevices of walls. Sniveling twilight by the curb disturb the circumspection of the day, making my spirits wait. I hear violins on Fifth Avenue and saxophones on Broadway, drums and horns in Harlem monotonously gay, gramophones exulting in the Bronx and wind in the telegraph wires crooning of yesterday and what the heart desires. Erdiguarties on Waverly Place, jangle of jazz on 14th Street, rumble of traffic and rhythm of pattering feet. And when the yellow lanterns bloom and window shades are down, evening is like a lonesome song in the bleak quarters of the town. Syncopated city of the lonely blues, your avenues are dance halls for my gloating soul.
Boom. Boom. Yeah. That's an honest assessment from a high-level J. What do you think about that, Chad? Did that open a couple of eyes? Did you have to, I don't know, take notes? It's really something. It's really something that this is actually not more widely understood at this point. You know, here we are. You got all the evidence you could possibly need. You know, we just have to keep going. It's you didn't get reasoned into this nutty world, and you need to be deprogrammed like any other fucking cultist, right? Repetition, 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 right? You were indoctrinated over millennia, generations. Your ancestors were fucking brainwashed. How are you going to escape, Goy? Well, it's not going to happen all at once. It's not going to happen suddenly. It's going to be gradual, right? And then finally, you come to this fucking realization. Then finally, like Saul of Tarsus, smitten off his horse by the light of the Lord, you will have a similar epiphany, and you will understand who rules over you and your place before Zion, on your knees, prostrated as a slave. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord, for this Jewish psyop that has enslaved the world. Anybody got a rattler out there you could throw me so I can show my faith in the Lord? Please, throw me a rattler. For there will be no poison coursing through my veins. The Holy Ghost will combat it. Now, what do? We didn't step in this dog shit yesterday. What do we do, Bert? What do you suggest we do? Stop playing in their sandbox, for one. Stop watching your Jewish Talmud vision, for number two. Trust nothing that comes out of their mouth, for three. Understand you live in an occupied country and your so-called elected leaders do not represent you, but carry the water for this group. And number 4, revolution. That's the only. What else can you offer? Realization, awakening, and revolution. Oh no, but Bert, Bjerknes says that all we need is to elect responsible leaders, and this will all get sorted out. Oh, okay. Oh, is that what he said? That's what he said? How do we get there? How do you vote your way out of a rigged system? Bjerknes. Anybody, listen, do me a favor, send Bjerknes an invite. I got a lot of questions to ask him. You know, about the Russian invasion of Syria, about changing this whole thing, or turning this all around with just responsible leadership. I mean, come on, dude. Come on. What are you, Thanos? You need to be Thanos, and you need to have the Infinity Stones to pull that one off, Bjerknes. What else? Tell me. What else? What else can you do? Well, this was a good idea. Let me try to find it for you guys. I think he's dead now. I think Vincent Bugliosi is dead. The Charlie Manson family prosecutor. Do you guys remember Vincent Bugliosi from Helter Skelter? He was that nice gentleman, that nice Italian gentleman DA that prosecuted the Manson family. What could possibly be a catalyst in a rigged system? It's tough. I can't think of any. But this is the right approach. Not that it could ever get off the ground, but let's just say, let's play devil's advocate and hear the man out. Guys, if you want to contribute, if you have any comments or questions, just make a request.
For any radio station to take is up to 200 R. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
We now turn to a man considered to be one of the best prosecutors in this country. In his career at the LA County District Attorney's Office, he successfully prosecuted 105 of 106 felony jury trials, including 21 murder convictions without a single loss. Alan Dershowitz calls him as good a prosecutor as there ever was. And the legendary F. Lee Bailey calls him the quintessential prosecutor. His most famous trial, the Charles Manson case, became the basis of his classic book, Helter Skelter, the biggest selling true crime book in publishing history. Two of his other books, And the Sea Will Tell and Outrage, also reached #1 on the New York Times bestseller list.
Today, we're joined by the renowned lawyer and author Vincent Bugliosi. His latest book is just published. It's called The Prosecution of George W. Bush for Murder. He joins us from Los Angeles. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Amy and Juan, I'm very happy to be on the show. I was told we'd have about 45 minutes. Now I'm told 20 minutes, so I'm going to have to make my answers very, very, very quick, unfortunately, and I don't think that we're going to be able to get into too much, but I was hoping we'd have a long time to talk about.
Well, why don't we start off by you just laying out your case and how you arrived at this argument, decided to write this book?
Well, in my book...
See, right off the bat, they cut the guy down to half of what he expected, right? Right off the bat.
The prosecution of George W. Bush for murder, I set forth an airtight legal case against George Bush that proves beyond all reasonable doubt that George Bush took this nation to war under false pretenses on a lie in Iraq, and therefore, under the law, he is guilty of murder for the deaths of over 4,000 young American soldiers in Iraq fighting his war. Not your war or my war or America's war, but his war. Interestingly enough, there have been billions of very harsh, critical words written and said about George Bush, none of which he could possibly care less about. So the words are absolutely meaningless. But up until now, other than words, no one has done anything at all to George Bush. No impeachment, no investigation of him. But this book here, the prosecution of George W. Bush for murder, in it, I put together a case against George Bush that could result, it absolutely could result in his being prosecuted for first-degree murder in an American courtroom. I set forth the legal architecture against him, the overwhelming evidence of his guilt, and the jurisdiction to prosecute him. And I say that if justice means anything at all in America, and if we're not going to forget about these 4,000 young American soldiers who are in their cold graves right now as I am talking to you, and came back from George Bush's war in a box or a jar of ashes, I say we have no choice but to bring murder charges against the son of privilege from Crawford, Texas. I may be sounding presumptuous to you right now, Amy and Juan, but I'm telling you this. I'm going after George Bush. I may not succeed, but I'm not going to be satisfied until I see him in an American courtroom being prosecuted for first-degree murder. In our segment here, I'd like to talk about a couple things. You people are the general, but I'd like to get into some of the evidence against Bush. And I'd also like to talk about how he's conducted himself throughout the entire war, having fun, smiling, laughing, enjoying himself. And you also might be interested in the story behind the story, what's happened with this book right here. For the first time in my 30-year career, the national TV and print media have completely blacked it out. They haven't succeeded. The book just came out. It's already this Sunday going to be on the New York Times bestseller list, but it's all by word of mouth. But those are the
All right, guys, do me a favor. You guys know what we got to go through here, jumping through the kosher hoops and the suppression and the throttling and the audio corruption. The ADL minders on this kosher platform don't appreciate the account, and the space is even less. So do us a favor, heart this thing, repost it if you got the balls. All right? If you're scared about being put on a list, goy, guess what? If you can hear the sound of my voice, you're already on it.
the three things I'd like to talk about, but whatever else you want to ask me, go ahead.
Well, let's start off just by giving us some of the key points in the evidence, especially in the early days of the war that you lay out in the book, from the National Intelligence estimate, his lying about that, and so forth.
Okay. Now there are many things in the book, but let's talk about a couple key pieces of evidence. In George Bush's first speech to the nation on Iraq and Hussein, Cincinnati, Ohio, October 7th, 2002. He told the nation that Hussein was a great danger to America, either by his attacking us with his weapons of mass destruction or giving those weapons to some terrorist group to attack us. And he said this attack could happen, quote, on any given day, meaning the threat was imminent. Unfortunately for George Bush, and I don't know how he could get around this at his trial, on October the 1st, 6 days earlier, the CIA sent George Bush its 2002 National Intelligence Estimate, a report from 16 U.S. intelligence agencies. There's a strong sound in my ear here. There's a big rattling sound here. Anyway, he was sent this report representing the consensus opinion of all 16 U.S. intelligence agencies on the issue of whether Hussein was an imminent threat to the security of this country. There's a lot of noise in my left ear, a constant rattle. If you can get rid of it, I'd appreciate it. And, well, it's not stopping. And on page 8 of this 91-page report, page 8 of it clearly and unequivocally says, and by the way, what I'm about to tell you, to my knowledge, has never appeared in any national newspaper or magazine in America. It may have, but to my knowledge, I've never heard this said before in any of the major magazines or newspapers of America. Page 8, 91-page report clearly and unequivocally says that Hussein was not an imminent threat to the security of this country, that he would only be a threat if he feared that America was about to attack him. In other words, he would only be a threat if he was forced to fight in self-defense. So we know, not think, but we know that when George Bush told the nation on the evening of October the 7th, 2002, Cincinnati, Ohio, that Hussein was an imminent threat to the security of this country, he was telling millions of unsuspecting Americans the exact opposite of what his own CIA was telling him. So if we had nothing else at all, this alone shows us that he took this nation to war on a lie, and therefore all of the killings in Iraq of American soldiers became unlawful killings and therefore murder. But it gets worse. October 4th, 3 days after the October 1st classified top secret report, Bush and his people had the CIA issue an unclassified summary version of the October 1st classified report so that this report could be issued to the American people and to Congress. And this report came to be known as the White Paper. And in this White Paper, the conclusion of U.S. intelligence that Hussein was not an imminent threat to the security of this country was completely deleted from the White Paper. Every single one of these all-important words were taken out. And the question that I have is how evil, how perverse, how sick, how criminal can George Bush and his people be? And yet, up to this point, unbelievably, and there's no other word for it, he's gotten by with all of this. I'll touch upon another piece of evidence. January 31st, 2005, 2003. By the way, you've all heard of the Downing Street memo, got a lot of attention. If I prosecuted Bush, that would be a very insignificant part of the case because it's ambiguous. This is the Manning memo that seems to have gone over the head of everyone. It's 100 times more important than the Downing Street memo. January 31st, 2003, George Bush and Prime Minister Tony Blair met in the Oval Office with 6 of their top aides, including Condoleezza Rice, the National Security Advisor for Bush, and Blair's chief foreign policy advisor, David Manning. Now, 2 months later, they go to war because they say Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and they had to go in there and disarm Hussein and these weapons of mass destruction. After the meeting, Manning prepares a 5-page memo stamped extremely sensitive in which he summarizes what was said at the meeting. And Manning writes that Bush and Blair expressed their doubts that any weapons of mass destruction would ever be found in Iraq, although 2 months later they went there because they said they had the weapons and we had to disarm them. But it gets much, much, much worse. Manning wrote that Bush was so worried, so upset over the failure of the UN inspectors to find weapons of mass destruction that he talked about 3 ways to, quote, provoke a confrontation with Hussein, one of which, Bush said, was to, quote, fly U-2 aircraft, reconnaissance aircraft, over Iraq, falsely painted in United Nations colors. And Bush said, if Hussein fires upon them, this will be a breach of UN resolutions and justify war. So here we have George Bush telling the American people, telling the world, that Hussein was an imminent threat to the security of this country. So we had to strike first in self-defense. But behind closed doors, this very small man was talking about how to provoke Hussein into a war. The very last person in the world that someone acting in self-defense would try to provoke is a person who he's in deathly fear of, the person who's about to kill him. If George Bush actually believed that Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, which was the main reason he went to war, the very thought of provoking Hussein into a war obviously would never, ever, ever have entered his mind. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but what I just told you is extremely powerful evidence of George Bush's guilt. I was on radio with Dennis Miller a couple days ago in L.A., and I told him about the Manning memo, and I said, now, Dennis, you're representing George Bush. You're his defense attorney. After you hear Manning testify to the Manning memo on the witness stand, other than trying to hide beneath the console table, what would your response be? And Dennis is very quick, very smart, and he gave a good answer. He said, I would call for a recess. There is no answer to the Manning memo.
And that's what we have to do for just 1 minute. Vincent Bugliosi is our guest, the renowned.
I bet you never heard this Vincent Bugliosi case against George W. Bush to bring him up on charges of murder. But, you know, I imagine, you know, in quiet moments, in a possible alternative timeline, maybe this happened. Maybe that was a catalyst, right? Obviously, this never happened. Fucking Curious George is fucking doing his animal finger painting in his Texas ranch, living the life, fearing nothing. Yeah, sure. Does he have to kind of steer? Well, him and Rumsfeld before Rumsfeld kicked the bucket. Or did Rumsfeld kick the bucket? I'm not even sure. He might be still kicking. They can't really travel everywhere they want to go because of fear of international criminal courts arresting them, etc. But for the most part, they're out. They're not fear. They have no fears. Now, if you can get away with that, what can't you get away with? And they not only get away with it, they continue to get away with it. How many people even knew that Vincent Bugliosi wrote this book, that he wanted to charge George W. Bush with murder? I'd be interested to know. I think this is probably new information for the vast majority of you.
An attorney, the man who put Charles Manson behind bars, has written a new book called The Prosecution of George W. Bush for Murder. We'll be back with him in a minute.
Thank you, AB.
Is the renowned prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi. He has written the new book, The Prosecution of George W. Bush for Murder. He is laying out his case. You begin your book, Vincent Bugliosi, by just telling us the stories of young soldiers who have died. More than 4,000 now. What about Iraqi civilians? How do they weigh into your case as you build it against the president?
Well, that's not going to prove guilty or not guilty. But if he's convicted of first-degree murder by an American jury and it gets into the penalty phase and the prosecutor seeks the death penalty, all of this evidence of how Bush responded to this horror in Iraq could be introduced in aggravation, just like the defense can offer evidence in mitigation. One of the underlying emotions behind this whole thing that prompted me to do this book, well, the main thing is that he took this nation to war under false pretenses. But
go ahead, Liam. Hello. Liam, are you speaking? I can't hear you.
That's wild. I was just about to. I requested, because I wanted to say, well, what about the Iraqis and all the people in the Middle East who we killed over this? Yes, over 4,000 American soldiers, but what about all of the tens of, maybe even hundreds of thousands that died? And then that's exactly the first question that she brought up, which, not to give her credit, that lady is the worst, but hey, this is great work. I'm just chiming in and say I'm here to support.
Thank you, my man. Liam Jared, everyone. Let's go back to this.
throughout this hell on earth that George Bush created, the evidence is very, very clear that with over 100,000 innocent Iraqi men, women, and children and babies, and 4,000 American soldiers dying horrible, violent deaths, and hundreds of thousands of their survivors crying out hysterically, and having no way to cope with the unspeakable horror of it all, and having nightmares over what happened. George Bush, the evidence is very, very clear, smiled through it all. In fact, you look at a photograph of Bush and 6 or 7 other people, they're all smiling. Who has the biggest smile on his face? George Bush. The evidence is very clear that while young American soldiers who never even had a chance to live out their dreams were being blown to pieces by roadside bombs in Iraq, George Bush was having fun and living life, enjoying life to the very fullest. I'm talking about running, bicycling, joking with friends, slapping backs, dancing and swiveling his hips like Elvis to blaring music, eating his hot dogs and blueberry pies, almost always seeming to be in the very best of good spirits. And you don't have to take my word for this. I have the photographs in the book and everything, but you don't take my word for this. George Bush himself has had no hesitancy in saying things like this. And as I quote George Bush, I want you to think of 2 things. Number one, the incredible horror and savagery and mutilation of bodies and beheadings and the sea of blood and the screams going on at the time he's making this remark. And try to think, if you can, of Presidents Roosevelt, Truman, LBJ, Nixon, during their respective wars saying things like this. Here's George Bush, right in the middle of all this horror. Laura and I are having the time of our lives. It's going to be a perfect day. I'm in a great mood. As recently as December 2007, I'm feeling pretty good about life. Now, Amy and Juan, even if George Bush was only guilty of making an innocent mistake and taking this nation to war, not murder, as I firmly believe, with all of the death and the horror and the suffering he has caused, what type of a monstrous individual is it who could literally be happy with his life? And that's part of the emotional underpinning for this book.
Well, Vincent Bugliosi, the other main line of evidence that you present in the book is his repeated attempts to connect Saddam Hussein to Al Qaeda and to the attacks of 9/11. Could you summarize those arguments?
Yeah, very, very quickly. He tried to convince the American people that Hussein was involved in 9/11. Now, right after 9/11, a poll of the American people, open-ended poll, showed that only 3% of the American public believed that Hussein and Iraq were involved in 9/11. And yet, within months, that number went up to 70% of the American people thought Hussein was involved in 9/11. Now, if it wasn't George Bush and his people who were responsible for it, then who was it? You, I, Danny DeVito? Here's what he did. He'd constantly, because what he was doing, he was trying to convince the American people of Hussein's involvement in 9/11 by unmistakable innuendo and implication. And under the law, that's the same thing as doing it expressly. One way he did it, he'd constantly talk about Hussein being an imminent threat to the security of this country, and in the same speech, sometimes the same breath, he kept talking about 9/11. Well, here's the American people, not accustomed to a president who's taken them to war under false pretenses. That thought's not even entering their mind. They're not parsing his words. They hear 9/11 and they hear Hussein being an imminent threat, and they came to the conclusion that Hussein must have been involved with Al Qaeda in 9/11. And then he just flat out lied by asserting that Hussein and Al Qaeda had terrorist connections. He'd say things like this. When you're talking about the war on terror, you cannot distinguish between Al Qaeda and Hussein. He said that Hussein was training Al Qaeda in bomb making and the use of poisons and deadly gases. Now, the average American infers from that. I mean, it's not too much of a leap of logic that if Hussein and Al Qaeda have these terrorist connections, and Hussein is training Al Qaeda, that Hussein must have been involved with Al Qaeda in 9/11. That was what he did by implication. But by implication in the law, he can't take the witness and say, well, I never said it. No, you didn't say it directly, but you said it indirectly. Let's see how far he would get in front of a competent prosecutor by saying, I never expressly said it. He said it by unmistakable implication. As late as August of 2006, over 90% of the troops in Iraq thought that it was payback time, that Hussein was involved in 9/11, and they were getting even for the American public for what Hussein and Iraq did to 9/11. Wherever you look, and I've got so much more evidence in this book, the evidence is overwhelming that this guy is guilty. And if we get a competent prosecutor, he's going to end up getting convicted of first-degree murder. And by the way, within a very short period of time, perhaps a week, I'm going to be reaching out to the prosecutors of America. There's close to 1,000 out there, looking for a courageous prosecutor, a state attorney general, a DA. I don't have any clout anymore. I got the clout of an emaciated moth. I'm not in law enforcement. But I'm going to be reaching out to prosecutors who do have clout, who do have the authority to go against George Bush. I'm sending them a copy of my book with a cover letter, telling them to read the book, and if they agree with me that the evidence of Bush's guilt is clear, and they feel that they have jurisdiction, and I've spent hundreds of hours at the law library establishing this all-important point of jurisdiction, then I'm going to tell them to proceed forward, and I'm going to offer my help in any way that they see fit, which could range all the way from being a consultant to being appointed a special prosecutor. I want to tell you just one little interesting story. There's a lawyer back east. I spoke to him 2 days ago. He said, Vince, I'm your biggest fan. I'm selling this book to everyone. I had a bet with Ralph Nader. Nader said this book will never get out. They're going to black it out. And he said, no, it's going to become a bestseller. And it has become a bestseller now. So we won the bet with Nader. I don't know how much they bet. In any event, he said, Vince, I live in a county and no citizen of this county has died so far in this war. But if a citizen of this county dies, I'm telling you, Vince, I'm going to run for district attorney. And if I become district attorney, I'm going to go after George Bush. I'm going to prosecute him. You can extrapolate that to thousands of prosecutors around this country, and maybe some law student who is hearing me talk right now and says, you know, when I get out, I'm going to become a DA or state attorney general, and I'm going to go after George Bush. You got to realize there's no statute of limitations for the crime of murder. So this could very well happen. At this stage of my life, I cannot engage in fanciful reveries. This is a very real thing that we're talking about here. I've established jurisdiction on a federal and state level for the prosecution of Bush for 2 crimes, conspiracy to commit murder and murder. On a federal level, we're really only talking about the Attorney General in Washington, D.C., operating through his Department of Justice. But on a state level, I've established...
Hey, guys, Corn Pop, the bad dude, sent me a DM. He says that he can't get the live chat. He can't. I don't even see the option. The chat. I don't see the option to open the chats on your space. Can you guys give me some feedback on that? How that works? Can you see a chat? Can you participate? Is there something going on? Obviously, there's something going on, right? Let's try to get to the bottom of that if we can. And your feedback is required.
Jurisdiction for the Attorney General in each of the 50.
You know what? Let's deal with that right now. Sapien, what's going on with the chat?
To the space itself on your profile, and then you comment. That's how you go around it. You heard me, Albert?
Okay, so you
It's distorted. I can't hear you now.
you can't hear me?
No, now I hear you. Okay.
Okay, so what you're telling me is on other spaces there's an active live chat like that's streaming simultaneously and not on mine?
So yeah, for instance, the icon, the chat icon, I see it myself, but when I click, nothing happens on your space. It's not the first time. It happened before on your space. So, but what I do, the workaround is you go to your profile and go to the space, and then you comment on that space. You cannot do live chat. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that, bro. It is what it is. What can we do? Corn Pop. Hello, welcome, buddy.
Hey, yeah. So can access the comments on my phone or on desktop. That's the situation for me.
Well, that sucks. Yeah. Listen. I don't know. Is this happening like now, or is it like every time, every space?
It's been maybe the past week or so.
Okay. All right. Well, we do what we have to do, I guess, and roll with the punches. And unfortunately, this is just our reality, guys. They don't. This message isn't kosher. It's not kosher approved or sanitized. It elicits and compels them to make a high level of kosher poop in their pants, and they soil themselves.
It's all good. We'll get through this.
Yeah, my man. Thank you, Corn Pop.
But at least you do in spaces, Albert, so they cannot, for example, cancel you like they did for other profiles. So that's the best thing then.
Yeah, from your mouth to God's ears, they can't cancel me, Sapien. They can cancel me, bro. Look, I'm used to working backwards. I had my highest numbers in the very first weeks I ever streamed on Facebook 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and I've had to work backwards ever since. The second you get on their radar, they do. There's 12 ways to sundown for them to suppress you, censor you, throttle you down, shadow ban you. Like I said, ban you from payment process, everything you can possibly imagine. Doxed. I got doxed by the gay brigade. You name it. You name it. But guys, we're here. We're not queer, so we're getting used to it. And if you like this content, if you want, this is a good time for me to plug for donations. If you like this content and you want to keep me going here and keep the lights on, please consider making a donation. All right? Because Dr. Eli Evil gets paid fucking millions of dollars to lie to you. Right? This guy's talk about T-bone steaks and a 5-star lifestyle. This guy's raking in the money for telling you nothing but fucking kosher lies. That's what he does. Let me go into the chat and drop a link to support the telecast, the broadcast here on this Shabbat stream. I'm going to drop it right now. It's been dropped. As the Talmud tells us, the older will serve the younger. Vincent Bugliosi, hello.
States, plus the hundreds of district attorneys and counties within those states, to prosecute George Bush for the murder of any soldier or soldiers from their state or county who died fighting his war in Iraq. And with all those prosecutors...
You have 30 seconds, and if you were the man who was trying this case and you were told you now have 30 seconds to sum up before the jury, what would those last words be?
Oh, that's an impossible situation.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Except to say that the evidence is overwhelming that George Bush took this nation to war on a lie, under false pretenses, and therefore, under the law, he's guilty of murder. And if justice...
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
Whoa, Daryl!
Come back with a verdict of guilty. If we're going to become a great nation again, we cannot become a great nation. We used to be. We cannot become a great nation unless we take the first step of bringing those responsible for the war in Iraq to justice.
Vincent Bugliosi, we want to thank you for being with us. His book is called...
Boom! The man that brought Charlie Manson to justice and his evil family, which was a big conspiracy that you don't even know the truth about the Manson family and the CIA connections in the Church of, what is it, the Final Judgment, right? These two Scientologists that opened up this fucking wackadoo cult in England, and they had tentacles across the transatlantic. And guess who was in their kind of orbit? David Berkowitz, the son of Sam killer, right? And his cult, which was called the Children. And he wasn't the sole gunman. It was a fucking whole operation. The whole son of Sam's killings was not the work of just David Berkowitz. It was an entire cult. There were dozens of people involved, including they actually filmed, I don't know how many of the murders, but there was a film crew that filmed one of them, and they sold it for profits as a snuff film. How many people know that? So you have the Church of the Final Judgment, these former Scientologists, right? David Berkowitz, son of Sam killer in New York, belonged to a cult called the Children. And where do they do their fucking rituals and shit in Untermeyer Park in Yonkers. How about that, folks? Samuel Untermeyer Park. And what was the name of Manson's cult? The Family. So you got the family on the West Coast, the children on the East Coast. Nothing is as it seems or has been presented, my friends. And this brings us right back to what we do here. Reconstruct history, right? To give you the context that you need. Without it, you're lost, right? You're a ship without a fucking rudder. You want to get some direction? Know your fucking history. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little agitated. It's a little frustrating, and I don't have the patience I once did. It's a great ashanda. So let's go back to how about listening to the pernicious influence, disproportionate power of the Rothschilds family and the overthrow of the Ottoman Empire. That's a good one. That's just a good little snippet.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the French Connections Friday night edition. Today's date is August 24th, 2007. It's actually on the cusp of being August 25th, ladies and gentlemen. We're 4 minutes to midnight here in central France. And we have put together an article with the help of and the research of Mohammed Rafiq. Mohammed has been a frequent guest on the French Connection, so many of you are well aware of Mohammed's work. There are people that have tried to assail our efforts in many areas that Mohammed has talked about, but his confirmations generally come from very reliable sources, very different sources. In fact, he uses archives, he uses internet, he uses historical documents, he uses all kinds of different sourcing to verify the things that he presents. And that there is no exception to tonight's presentation on the foundations of the Young Turk movement and how it was orchestrated through the Italian lodge structure, Masonic lodges, which were infiltrated in the century prior to the Turkish Young Turk Revolution in the Ottoman Empire downfall, and how these lodges were used as instruments to undermine the control of the Turkish government, of the Ottoman Turk government, and institute a new government under Ataturk. Now, I'm going to bring up my guest in one moment, but I want to make a statement about Daniel Abramson's presentation. You will find that it is a very well orchestrated presentation. It is in almost every way mirrors the work we put out on our audio files and in our written work and Bolin's work and others that we've had on the French Connection for about 2 years now. He does a very complete job of presenting it. The fact of the matter is, though, you might want to ask yourself who had it first, and not this isn't a one-upsman game here, but rather that where were the Jack Bloods of the world who actually were at this conference where he did this presentation, when they were bad-mouthing us for our efforts exposing the Zionist criminals. They were telling everybody that we were no good, we were liars, and now all of a sudden they've come to see the light. Well, what we've come to understand is that the real game they're trying to play here is take control of the message. And we'll go into that in another file, but I just wanted to point it out that they are attempting again to take control of the message. This is no different than what Mr. Berkness has done. He did early files with us, and now he's claiming that the research we've got is from his research, which certainly it is not. And
whoa! Found things whoa! Did you get that? I got to send that to fucking Adam Green. So Bjerknes melted down on DBS, and it's only a matter of time. And of course, they stole from me. Plagiarism, right? We're all familiar with these rantings of fucking Bjerknes. How fucking incredible is that? You know what? I know Adam doesn't want to talk about it, so I would get him on here in a second and play that for him. But that is just too much. Too much. Freemasonry and the fall of the Ottomans. Okay. Yeah. How about that, guys? How about that shit? Crazy, right? Crazy. The pattern is unmistakable. Let's hear that again.
Pointed out that they are attempting again to take control of the message. This is no different than what Mr. Berkness has done. He did early files with us, and now he's claiming that the research we've got is from his research, which certainly it is not. And we have pointed out that they are attempting again to take control of the message. This is no different than what Mr. Berkness has done. He did early files with us, and now he's claiming that the research we've got is from his.
Go ahead, Brother B. Hello.
Hey, everybody. Brother B here. I was wanted to go back when you were talking about the Manson family. Was that the Tavistock Institute they had out there in California or out of England
Tavistock.
or something where
Tavistock.
Yeah. You know who did a good deep dive on that was our late friend, the late Davy Crocco, man. He got really deep into that. And with this, what was that? The guy, the prosecutor,
Matthew North.
Yeah, and what was the prosecutor's name again? The Italian guy. I can't pronounce his last name. Oh yeah, he really got into that.
He tried Charlie Manson and his family.
Yeah, what a what a government psyop that was. The whole 60s peace, love, and all that. Stuff. Anyhow, I'll go back to listening.
All right.
He will not touch, has not discussed. And again, he's trying to carry the message to the Armenian community so that the criminals themselves are presenting the work rather than the actual researchers. But I'm going to bring up my guest right now. Mohammed, are you with me?
I am indeed. Good evening, Daryl.
Nice to have you back, Mohammed. You know, as always, we're trying to move the ball down the field. And you made an interesting observation that the French Connection has always been out at the head of the tip of the spear, as it were, with our research and the things that we've discovered. And it's oftentimes the people that are doing their own catch-up are actually the bad guys trying to usurp our position in leadership here as researchers. So they've got a three-pronged approach to trying to destroy the French Connection. First, assail our character and us personally, and then usurp our leadership as researchers, and then finally to ignore us. And those are the three ways that they have tried to get rid of our message. I don't think it's working. What do you think?
Well, I think that from the figures which you're quoting, Daryl, it seems like more and more people are tuning in to your shows, and more people are looking at the pages which you're putting on your site, and the whole thing is growing. So on that basis alone, factually, they're failing.
Yeah, I agree. And what we've got with your present presentation here on this Young Turk movement, you want to get us started on a couple of the points. In fact, there's going to be the accompanying article that you wrote on the file with this, but I'd like to discuss some of the nuances of your research. You want to start us off with this movement and possibly how it got its beginnings?
Sure. I mean, we had a bit of a discussion the other day, didn't we, Darryl, on this subject where we touched it a bit, and I felt a little bit guilty at the end of it about not really filling in details and giving the listeners to your show hard and fast researchable facts, which is what we're used to giving people. So I went out and put something together from the books which I normally have that I would use as my sources, and I've looked to see what kind of information was available on the internet so that it's there for referral purposes.
Hold on a second, Mohammed. I got a question for Björkness out there. If someone that's not blocked by him could pass this along. Hey, Björkness, have you ever worked with anyone who didn't steal your research? Is is there a solitary single individual? Like, I posed this question to Elon Musk to produce one Zionist Jewish account that he suspended. I'm asking you a very similar thing. Can you name me one person that you've ever collaborated with or worked with that didn't steal your research or plagiarize you? I'm all ears here, CJB. Let us know. Let us know that you're not a fucking lunatic, raving lunatic, loon. Right? Provide me with one, please. Please, I'm waiting.
Because, as you said in the previous show, maybe for somebody listening to this for the first time, it's too fantastic. It's just, this can't possibly be the case. So what we're trying to do, just to set the background for everybody, I'm trying to use authorized Orthodox historians and biographers who talk very coldly. And as you've read the piece already, Darryl, I'm also quoting people like the British ambassador to Constantinople, the US ambassador, and other similar kinds of figures from declassified and publicly available government documents. And of course, Mr. Gray himself, the Foreign Secretary at the time, in the Foreign Office of the British government. So very well-known people. The reason for that is that the people like the ADL at the moment who are trying to not recognize the genocide as one of history's many rewrites, there's a group of people out there on the net who are publishing their version of history, which has got some of the important facts. They admit quite a few elements, and then they try and take people off down the garden path this way or that way to try and make it look like the real protagonists were somebody else.
That's right.
So this is the nature of the activity, because what we've been trying to do, the work that you've been doing, that I've been trying to support you with, is to show people that it's the same group that have marched down the centuries that have been up to this.
Yeah.
And so what they have to do is make it look like it's been different groups throughout the centuries involved in these activities. Therefore, this allegation is unfounded.
That's right. Well, the interesting thing that I've discovered from your research, as well as, and I have to admit, some of the research from other people who are trying to marginalize us as leaders in this fight, do point out that Sabbatai C has a very important role to play in the relationship that the Ottoman Turks had with the Young Turks, and how the crypto-Jewish movement within the Caliph's empire began to grow. Now, what you point out in the piece is that there was friction between the Armenian community that was being actually fomented and exacerbated by the British, American, and other governments, German governments. Was it German you said? I can't remember inside the piece, but there were groups out there trying to have the Armenians rise up a little bit for independence or more recognition within the Ottoman Empire. And this kind of led the Caliph, I would imagine, to suspect them, which was his downfall, because the people that were telling them to suspect the Armenians for this were actually the ones that ultimately took him over.
I think that the side scraps that were going on with the Armenians and the Caliph weren't major issues. They were internal domestics. They were seen by the British and the Germans and the Russians as an attempt to make friends in the area with parties that were hostile to the leadership. You know, so it was purely for international political purposes. That they all saw that in the event that changes would happen in the government, or that the Armenians succeeded in getting devolution to some degree and autonomy, that they would have been allies at that stage and would have had influence in the area. And of course, the Armenians were sat on the Baku oil fields at that time. So there were political reasons there. And what we have going in the opposite direction, as I point out in the piece, this Young Turk movement, who want to actually divest everybody divest the Sultanate of the other Muslim lands and just focus on those which are Turkic. But they included Armenia as Turkic lands. Right. And they wanted a national identity that would be totally irrespective of faith or belief, and it was completely Turk-based. And that is something which Laufer, the British ambassador to Turkey himself, observed and sent back to the Foreign Office as the view of the Young Turk movement.
You pointed out something just a couple of statements ago about having them try to blame several other disparate groups for the things that they're doing. One at that time was the British Crown, and you'll notice that in the modern day, the British Crown is not resisting the inner workings of this group. But at the time of this writing, were the British government and the Crown of Britain behind the activities of the Young Turk movement?
Well, this is an example of the kind of false trails which are put out there. There is an article which appeared in Executive Intelligence Review in 2005. They've also put it up on their net, on their web page, on their website, which is helpful. And in that, they try to give the idea that the British government or the British establishment were the true secret forces behind the Young Turk Revolution. And what they do is they go to a pivotal character, who I mentioned in the piece, and his name was Karaso. He was a Sephardic Jew from Salonika, a lawyer by training, and he somehow became all of a sudden a Grand Master of one of the lodges in Salonika. And from there, basically became the safe haven for the Young Turk movement. And through various political reasons, the lodges were classed as houses of foreign nationals, and a system had come into place which were known as the capitulations, which meant that houses of foreign nationals in the lands of the Caliph were exempt from police searches and so on. So the Young Turks were able to operate inside these lodges under diplomatic immunity, you see. And what they say in their piece, and Caruso and these lodges are pretty cool. They don't deny Caruso. They don't deny the lodges. They don't deny any of that. What they say is that, but Caruso was an agent of Lord Palmerston. And as an agent of Lord Palmerston, everything that he did was for Lord Palmerston and Lord Palmerston's agenda.
Okay.
You see. So
now what ties did Palmerston have to any Zionist? There was none that you could suss out. What were there?
No, Palmerston was not Zionist at all, and it's a nonsense, really, to try and link this man to Russell. There's no way. You see, something that's very important in all of this, when we look for things that don't add up, there's a very simple one. Karasu was the Grand Master of a lot.
All right. What, Bert, what? The Young Turks, the Armenian genocide, the Ottoman Caliphate. What are you doing playing this? Why are we listening to this? This seems kind of boring. Well, do you want the context? Do you know how huge, you know how significant this is? Do you know how desperately that they were trying for hundreds of years, for centuries, to bring down the caliphate, to get their hands on Palestine? Now, does the significance enter your mind? This is huge because it led to the creation of the Frankenstein abomination. They had to set it up. How are you going to set it up? Well, you're going to use these Freemasonic Denme crypto Jews called Young Turks. That's how. That's why this is fucking hugely significant.
We have to ask the question, how do you get a job like that? You know, how do you become in charge of a Freemasonic lodge? And then we get into this really complicated world, which I've avoided in the document because it is so complex, of all the different types of lodges that are around. United Grand, Lodge of England, the Orient, the US, York Rites, Scottish Rites, the different types of rites that are practiced in.
And of course, we can't diminish the role of Freemasonry, right? So this should be very interesting for most people that have intellectual curiosity. You have this nexus of organized world Jewry, right? The globalists, right? The Zionists, Freemasonry, crypto Jews. It's all there. This is a template, and this is the pattern. Multiple tentacles, right? The octopus. Oh, you got an octopus, you're an anti-Semite. Oh, well, if we can draw a straight line from each tentacle of the octopus, are we still anti-Semites? I'm asking. Anyone.
And this is an extremely complex area. But one thing we can be sure of is that the Grand Master of a lodge can only be appointed by someone who is above him. And coming above that particular lodge, Carasso's lodge, which was seen as an Italian lodge, would take us to the Grand Orient Lodge of Italy. Right. And the head chief at that lodge, the Grand Master at that lodge, is the only man in the whole world that can give anybody the job of being Grand Master at the lodge in which Carasso was organising his activities in Salonika.
Now, who was the Grand Master at the time of Carasso's ascension to the Grand Lodge in Istanbul?
In Salonika.
In Salonika, I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was the Resorta Lodge in Salonika, number 80. And the other thing that I've given the online reference for as well is that Ataturk, who became leader of Turkey, was also a Freemason and a member of the same lodge.
And just by coincidence, these two gentlemen were both from the same faith, were they not?
Well, they were both Donmei.
They were both, and the Donmei were pseudo-Jewish Sabbatian followers, were they not?
Well, that's exactly what they are. They're crypto-Jewish, outwardly Muslim, inwardly Jew. I don't know how you can really...
You see a pattern here? You see a pattern here? Joseph in Egypt. Moses in Egypt. Right? Jesus in Palestine. Saul in Palestine. Denmes, Conversos, Moranos. Right? Cryptos. And they teach this. This is the thing. Infiltrate, rule from the land of thine enemies.
It baffles me what they must think as individuals, what their personal identity is, because it confuses me just thinking about it externally.
Well, at some point in the future, Mohammed, I'd like to discuss what being a Sabbatian is, and when we go through the idea of being a Bohemian, and everybody thinks that that's just being a fun-loving person, well, we're going to give them another eye-opener at some point. We've discussed this before, but I would like people to understand that Orthodox Judaism as practiced by Neturei Karta is certainly not Sabbatian in any way, and that in fact it's diametric in its activities. But let's get back to this Young Turk thing. Now, that lodge, who ran the Aryan Lodge of Italy at the time of Carasso's ascension to his Salonika position?
Well, when we look into the actual formation of the Grand Orient Italy Lodge. It is an amazing fact, but you yourself have seen it, the historical evidence for it. It was actually created by Napoleon Bonaparte himself at the time that he brought Italy to its knees and effectively became king of Italy. And as part of his process of taking over, they put various new institutions in place, one of which was the Grand Orient of Italy. This means that the charter, because each lodge is started by a charter. If we wanted to start a new lodge in France, you would apply to the Grand Orient of France for permission to have a charter. And they would then grant a charter and you would be able to operate under that Grand Lodge. So all minor lodges, small lodges, are under a Grand Lodge.
Well, now, since the Grand Lodge in Italy was a formed lodge through Napoleon, and Napoleon at the time of that founding was Emperor of France. It would probably be in keeping with his position as the Grand Master of the Orient Lodge of Paris, or someone of that level of position. In my guessing,
the Grand Orient of France granted the charter.
That's right, to the one in Italy, right?
Yeah. So and then Napoleon put his stepson in as Grand Master of Italy. Now, for Napoleon to be in a position to appoint his stepson as Grand Master of Italy, by implication alone, Napoleon has to be the Grand Master of the Grand Orient of France. Because only the Grand Master of the Orient of France can appoint somebody to be Grand Master of another chartered lodge.
Well, let's go off on a little segue here for a moment. Now, I think the Zionists under Weishaupt, they understood right away that there was already a power structure in place that they could, if they were crafty enough, usurp the influence of by stealth, by lying, by embezzlement or fraud or whatever they needed to do, or just by plain numbers as they became larger and in population. These Zionists, or many of them being crypto Jews, moved into positions of importance within these lodges around the 1760 period, if I'm not mistaken, at least in the United States. And they were singled out by some of the founders of the United States as being a danger to the freedoms of America. George Washington wrote about it, so did Jefferson. Both of them were involved in these lodges at some level. But what they didn't know at the time was that there was already a move afoot by Zionist elements, which were not called Zionist at the time, but Jewish elements, to usurp the influence of these lodges and take over their power. And this is why on the internet, the reason I'm bringing this up is a lot of people blame the Masons for everything. They blame the Illuminati for everything. And what I'm trying to point out right now is, yes, they are involved. Yes, they are big parts of this. But who formed these organizations and who took them over and who controlled them?
Right. Discernment. DBS has it.
Is more important, and there's a higher level there's a higher layer of control going on here, is there not?
Well, Freemasonry and the lodges were a tool. That's the way to view it now. It's just a tool. At the time that you're mentioning, the late 18th century, Jews were able to enter into the lodges in the United States. That's correct. Yep. But in Europe, they had been the preserve of the royal and noble families, your barons, your lords, your dukes, and they would meet in these kinds of places. So they by virtue of powerful people patronizing them, they had become institutions of power. And the Jews, because of their faith, a lot of these lodges have rites, which are the practices, if you like, the prayer or whatever we want to think of them as, the things that they actually do as worship, were Christian oriented. And so the Jews had a great deal of difficulty getting into them. And in fact, in Germany, they weren't allowed ever, well, not for a long time, into mainstream lodges. They had special Juden lodges, Jewish lodges that they went into. And so the Jews, for a long time, were looking at these power structures within Europe externally and wanting to get in. And that's why they started pretending to be noblemen from other countries arriving in England or whatever, and claiming to be the Duke of this country or that.
Isn't that isn't it interesting how the Rothschilds are barons and dukes and this and that? They were from a small banking dynasty. They weren't royals in their origins, but they ascended to royalty by their own declarations. And you'll find that many royals in Britain today are of Jewish heritage, are they not?
The first baron, French baron, actually was given his baronet by the King of Austria, and it was due to monies that were owed by the King of Austria to them, and that what they did was they forgave part of the King's debt in return for a title that would impress the people in France. This is typical of the sort of social climbing that they were involved in because of their standing as Jews in society. They did these kinds of things. But coming back now, in France was special, because the first member of the Rothschild family that arrived in France, he really struck it off with the monarchy in France and lent huge amounts of money, which caused Gilbert and Sullivan to write in one of their famous operas that they were making monumental loans to foreign thrones. The French, the kings of France just owed so much money to these people that they practically could do anything they wanted. And by the middle of the 19th century, we find that a man called Camus, a Jew from Paris, managed to become the first Grand Master of a lodge in Europe who was Jewish. According to the Encyclopedia Judaica, he achieved that in 1869.
Yeah.
And he became the Grand Master of the Grand Orient of Paris, which basically put him in charge of all the French lodges and all the other Grand Orient lodges throughout Europe and all their subsidiaries. And of course, which did exist at that time, he was technically the overlord, even to the Italian lodges as a result, like the Macedonia Resorta in Salonika.
Yeah.
So a Jew had actually, for the first time in history, had got into such an incredible position of power, but that was because of the debts owed by the royal family of France to the Rothschild family, and the fact that they developed great rapport, that the Rothschilds would forgive debts and do favors for them in return for this kind of power.
Now they use this newfound strength in their Masonic roots and their Masonic lodges, and they had this diplomatic right going into the turn of the from the 18th to the 19th. I mean, from the 19th to the 20th century, when things were hotting up for the caliph's control. He was having problems throughout his kingdom. I mean, he was putting out fires constantly around the Arab lands. The French were not only fighting him in parts of Morocco where he had influence, in parts of Algeria where he had influence. In other words, there were little problems he was having everywhere. Were there not?
Yes, I mean that was one of the ways in which they defeated him. He was known as the Grand Old Spider by the people who knew him. He had a web of intrigue everywhere. And the way that they actually took him on was by starting lots of small fires everywhere. He had them in the Balkans, he had them in Greece, he had them in Armenia, he had them in Arabia Felix, now known as Saudi. He had them in Syria.
So there was his empire was feeling the death of 1,000 cuts.
That's right, and everybody was sort of trying to wear him down because, you know, they were aware. We had the Zionists coming in looking for their own agenda. In the meantime, the Armenians were sat on oil. There was a revolution going on in Russia, so they had their eyes on the Balkans. Everybody had nationalistic interests or military interests in getting rid of the guy, you know, and getting rid of his structure. So they all had vested it, and they just all attacked at the same time.
Now, interesting, you wrote, Mohammed, you wrote something interesting about Jabotinsky. Tell about what the research finds about Jabotinsky, who, if anybody's done any history reading on the Russian Revolution, instrumental, and along with Trotsky and others. But tell them what his job was in this group.
Well, one of the most amazing things which proves that is the fact that Jabotinsky and Pavus, whose real name Alexander Israel Helphand, both turned up, I think around 1910-ish, something like that, in Istanbul, employed by Carasso directly, in two of them, because Carasso started a couple of journals when they'd taken over, a newspaper and a journal, The Young Turk and the Turkish Homeland, and he employed Jabotinsky and Pavus to act as editors in one form or another to these two periodicals. And even the Executive Intelligence Review writers, who are all Jews, by the way, don't deny this. And we have to ask, what are these Bolsheviks doing in Turkey? You know, they're supposed to be, you know, communist through and through, totally against the idea of nationalism, and they're trying to create a communist state without borders and getting rid of nationalist identity. And here they are supporting a nationalist movement that's trying to create a single national identity for people in this particular part of the world, which was in direct opposition to the revolution which was going on north of the Black Sea.
Well, then there's another interesting thread, bringing in New York Jewry into this. And we know about the money coming from the Schiff family of New York, the $20 million and the boatload of weapons and 4,000 Brooklyn Jews going over to Russia. But Morgenthau was a money man at the time, working Rothschild's banks in the United States. And what happened with him is odd because he became the ambassador to Turkey.
Morgenthau Senior, exactly. Yeah. The interesting thing at this time was that he would have been preserving the bankers' interests. Yep. And at the time of the revolution, one of the things that's difficult that we must contextualize ourselves here is that Zionism was still in its infancy. It was an idea, it was a concept. The Caliphate was still in charge of these lands. It wasn't until after the First World War that changed. After the First World War, Morgenthau had gone back to the United States. So he was there looking at things from a militarist and business perspective, looking after the banking and business interests. He wasn't actually looking at a Zionist agenda. The Zionist agenda was being run by a part of the Rothschild family, and not all parts of the Rothschild family were in agreement with it. Although they stumped the money up when it was requested of them, not all of them agreed with the idea and thought, you know, let's buy the land or let's do this or that or the other. They didn't all agree with this. But Schiff said unequivocally that he put 20 on his deathbed, and it's a matter of public record that he spent $20 million on the USSR.
But it's astonishing that he has his financial fingers on, and Ben Friedman talks about Morgenthau's involvement along with Brandeis and the others. Working on Wilson at the time, and so then it's odd that Wilson, his administration, would actually put Morgenthau in charge of the Turkish ambassadorship. It all comes together once you start looking at all these threads.
it would have been more. I think that Morgenthau would have batted in the other direction had he been there after the First World War and after the Second World War, should we say, when the State of Israel was officially recognized. But not everybody was supporting the Zionist experiment, especially when they had nothing to show for it. The fact that part of the Rothschild family put money up for a wild enterprise, really. I mean, if I came to you with that as a business plan, saying, I'd like you to back me on the following thing, and you said, what's that? So I want you to finance me to knock down Erich Schmidt's house, and I want to get back, people who lived there 3 generations before or whatever, and come up with this wild idea. You'd say, you want me to throw good money into that? So you can see why some people wouldn't necessarily have supported it at that time. But obviously, as the decades have gone on, more and more people have come into line and put their shoulder to the wheel and come behind this enterprise, you see.
Well, what we do find as well going forward is that the Young Turks did organize themselves well enough to defeat the forces of the Caliph and took over. Now, what we find now is a lot of people in modern history, especially from, like, if you read the Executive Intelligence and many other publications, they're going to push you away from the idea that, first of all, that the Young Turks were entirely a Sabbatean Jewish group, but that they were solely and principally responsible for the genocide of the Armenians. Now, there were skirmishes again between the Turkish troops, but it didn't turn into a genocide until it was ordered by these forces, by the Young Turk forces.
Another claim that they do make now is that it's not a genocide because it wasn't premeditated. So they're saying one of the conditions for calling something a genocide is that it was premeditated. Again, Lowther, the ambassador to Britain, who was aware of some of the CUP, which was what they called themselves, or the Ittihad movement, also the Young Turk movement, 3 names of the same group, that the CUP had said, we are going to use even massacres to enforce national identity on people. And that was at their meeting, I believe, in 1909 or 1910, 2 years before the massacres began.
Now, what we get is that after the massacres were well underway, the rest of the world by this time was engaged in World War I, and so much of what was being done in the far-off lands of Armenia fell off the front pages of any Western publication. You might have found it on page 20 being mentioned in kind of a short note 2 weeks after the event. But the fact is that it wasn't getting much coverage until long after the dust settled and people started realizing that an entire people had almost been completely eliminated from our planet.
Post First World War, the focus shifted, of course, to what was going to be done with Palestine, right. And hence the Versailles Treaty and all. Everybody. I mean, you couldn't get any other subject on the front page. This was what the big issue was, and of course the Bolshevik Revolution. It was so huge. At the end of the First World War, we've got this change in the Middle East. We've got the Bolshevik Revolution. Yeah, very sad for the Armenian peoples. But their plight was pushed onto the back pages, hardly noticed, and when pro-Ottoman Sultanate forces spoke out for them, which they did, and tried to say this was a Young Turk pre-planned mass murder, they were just marginalized, sidelined, and sometimes even beheaded.
Now, interesting, a parallel murder, genocide, I think, because it was pre-planned, was actually going on at the hands of the Bolsheviks in parallel, and it happened in the 1920s when they moved south into the steppes, into the Ukraine area and into the Georgian region, and started wholesale slaughtering of Christians in that southern steppe region under the Bolshevik control. And so basically, what you've got is from Turkey north into Armenia, a murder of Christians, and from Moscow south southwest, murdering of Christians. And in that whole region, what we're talking about 25 to 30 million murders in a 15-year period.
And we also find that some players are architects of the murders in one side of the Black Sea, because this is basically going on the north or south of the Black Sea.
That's right.
That means the Black Sea. And on the north, we find that people who were born in one town, the same town, Odessa, Jabotinsky and Parvus, they were born in Odessa. They were involved in both, again, Ashkenazi Jews were involved in the revolution in the north and the mass murders in the north. And then they joined in the revolution in the south and the mass murders in the south. Completely different causes. It's so strange to see people with people join one cause and then another cause like this. It's just so strange.
But the cause ends up murdering Christians in the millions, either through direct assault or starvation or other. But what we see is that there was a plan to do this stuff in advance, because they organized these killing fields and throughout that 10 or 15-year period. And it's the same people, as you just mentioned, behind both of these slaughters.
And that means that whoever was giving them the orders in one revolution was able to command them to go and join another one. As soldiers of fortune or soldiers of revolution, they had a single boss that managed to instruct them to leave one theatre of war and join another one. And when they join that second one, they become employees of Karasho himself. And that brings us then to, what the link is. Where does it go from there? Well, we've shown that Karasho's lodge, he could have only been appointed by the Grand Master of the lodge, which in turn was under the Grand Mastership of the Grand Orient of Paris. We have to say that the Grand Master of Paris effectively appointed Karasho into that position.
And he was Jewish.
Yeah, and then we have one character, because a lot of characters are fairly well known, but one character who isn't that well known, he probably was in his day, but now isn't that well known, was a chap called Mehmet Kavit.
Yep.
Sabatian, Don May, beyond doubt, but strangely, according to Professor Evram Erlich, also he was an ardent Zionist and saw the advantages for Turkey in the Jewish settlement of Palestine. The fact that he was making this claim that, it would be good for Jews to go to Palestine at the time of 1908, 1909 is really interesting. And it becomes beyond interesting when we find out that in 1926 he fell foul, for whatever reason, with Ataturk. Ataturk was beginning to solidify and protect his power in Turkey. And what he did was anybody who could potentially overthrow him, who had been colleagues of his and supporters during the revolutionary movement, he started to kill them off one by one. And in 1926, Ataturk, I think, killed about 30 or 40 of the Young Turk revolutionaries that he considered to be dangerous to him. And one of them was Mehmet Kavit. And Mehmet Kavit had been found guilty, along with 3 other people, of an attempted murder on Ataturk himself, an assassination attempt on Ataturk. And when he was found guilty and sentenced to death, something very strange happened. And we find that a very famous French historian, Alexander Zhemakov, said that Kavit, I quote, had connections with French financial circles, and both the French government and the House of Rothschild appealed to Ankara on his behalf. So Mehmet Kavit, to sum up, Mehmet Kavit, who was born in Salonika, Don May, member of the Young Turk movement, finds himself facing the death sentence, and all of a sudden, the French government and the House of Rothschild appealed to Ataturk to let him live. None of the other conspirators, just this one man.
Yeah.
How did they know of him?
And why would it have mattered to them?
Exactly. Why would it have mattered? How did they even know he existed? Why did it matter? Yet he was the only one who was actually a Zionist. So we've got a French, one man who's got a connection back to France that's considered so important in France that they've asked Ataturk to spare his life against an assassination attempt. And he commanded that amount of clout with those people. So they knew who he was. There can be no doubt about that. And we have to say, well, okay, these people wanted to protect him because he was Zionist. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And we then say, well, when we find that Rafik Bey, another one of the Young Turk movement, was actually in Paris in 1908, receiving money and support, and we don't know who the other members of his delegation were, but several members of the delegation went to Paris. They were interviewed by the Tom newspaper, and I've given a reference for that. And we find then that at the other end, 18 years later, these people are actually asking Ataturk to spare his life.
Well, you pointed out something interesting in a private call, where, of course, throughout this, I mean, if you go to the Balfour documents, if you go to the financing of the settlement of Israel, if you go to the people behind the Cavit's attempt to be spared, it always leads back to the Rothschild family. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's where the power stops, does it? Well, now, we're not going to be able to put our finger on exactly who's holding the levers of power above that level, but there are indications that he takes some of his marching orders from somewhere else.
Somebody sold the idea of Zionism to him, and sold him on the idea of financing it and bringing the money. And he agreed to finance it, and he agreed to support it, and he actually gave up his ordinary day-to-day banking activities to become a full-time philanthropist on behalf of the rest of the Rothschilds. And he went around raking money in and handing it out to the Zionist cause. So here is a man whose job it was to fund the Zionist cause. Part of the Zionist cause was the overthrow of the caliphate.
Yep.
And we are supposed to then believe that he didn't give money to that cause, and yet he intervened in the matter of the execution of one of the few known Zionists involved in the cause. So he had direct links to people in the Young Turk movement who were actually on the Zionist agenda, and those people were being financed in order to achieve that agenda. When Ataturk wanted to get rid of him, they even asked, please save him.
Well, we know that the Rothschild banking fortune was the money power behind Napoleon's rise to power 100 years earlier. I mean, he was drawing his loans for his equipment and his forces and his ships and whatnot to build the army that he went across Europe with. And he went to the bankers for that, and of course, the banker he went to was his own national power broker, and that was the Rothschild banking fortune. Now, the same was true with Wellington's army, and the British army was going to the Nathan Rothschild side of the family in London.
It was an interesting situation going on at that time, in which people were being played off against each other, and the only thing that there was one group left holding the money. Yes, no doubt about that. But I think for them,
holding the money.
Well, everybody owed them money.
But see, Mohammed, here's the interesting thing that I find, and that most, and this, I brought up this guy, Abramson, in the beginning. He kind of, this guy did, Abramson talks a lot about the things we just discussed here. Not this particular subject, but a lot of these subjects. But he leaves out the importance of Sabbatean Zionist Jewish control over all of these criminal activities generation after generation. Now, what he did do is he mentions that they were involved, but he doesn't mention that they are the leadership of it. And what we've been trying to do here on the French Connection is make those links clearer to the listening public, as well as to find out if there is in fact something even higher than the Rothschild family. And of course, myself personally, I believe you'll find some of those answers in the Lubavitch movement, and you know, to get into that is even more difficult, but because that is a very secretive group when you find out who's actually running things over there, and those folks are actually claiming to have the new Messiah, the one that's going to build the Temple Mount in Israel and claim dominion over the world. Now, if one is to believe that these people are actually believing their own dogma and their own hyperbole, then they're going to be buying into the idea that one world government is going to come under the auspices of Noahide laws, run out of Jerusalem, with the banking structure that is a single banking structure worldwide, run by the banking arm of Rothschild, and it has its tentacles in almost every corner of our globe, if not.
Sounds familiar, right? Sounds like something you heard on No More News or with Brian Dawson or Bill Cooper, etc., right? We have the receipts. It's not like this is a great mystery, right? It's they bury it deep. You have to search for this information. They're not going to make it easy for you, but they can't erase it, right? It can't be erased. They don't have the what is it, that fucking movie with the memory wipe with the pen, right? They can't memory wipe you, the world, because we have the receipts. So this was a huge revelation for me, right? Having these guys do the hard legwork and do the hard digging to find it, and then to share it, and then you can go research it. You can check their sources and their citations. It's interesting shit. I'm fascinated with real history.
Am I correct in making those kinds of assumptions?
I think that you're certainly going in the right direction with that, Darryl. You know what I mean? Coming back to the first part of what you said, it's very common for these people to affirm, yes, these events are going on, and then try to put a different controller on it, so that way they assign the blame elsewhere and try to keep the guilt from themselves. They can't deny the facts are going on. And rather like I'm showing with these people who've rewritten history here and tried to change who Carousel was working for, in the same way you've got somebody going out there presenting a lot of the information that you've presented, but missing out 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 really critical pieces of the puzzle in understanding what's really going on. And they hope through that to show confusion, and then they have other people who take these differences to cause discord. So they want confusion and discord, and rather than people actually sitting down and
you know, all these common tropes, they fund both sides of every war. They're behind all the wars, blah, 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 blah. It's all poppycock. Is it really? Is it really? When we know that the French side of the Rothschild family was bankrolling Napoleon and the British side of the Rothschild family was bankrolling Wellington, is it really a fucking vicious lie? Is it really a horrible trope? Is it really? Reality is anti-Semitic. Real history is anti-Semitic. Facts are anti-Semitic. You see this absurdity in it all, don't you? And why you gotta just fucking laugh in their face.
trying to resolve this and agree that this is correct or that's correct. What they want is confusion and discord. And what we're trying to do, like you say, is present things clearly and say, look, you know, there's some facts and here's the sources for it. You know, we're not making this stuff up. This is what really happened.
Well, you made another interesting, Mohammed, you made another interesting point to the Armenian community, that we have powerful documented evidence as well as some very substantial circumstantial evidence that allows us to suppose the Rothschilds' involvement in the Armenian activities, as well as the Young Turk movement and the Salonika group, and that if they were to take a page from the playbook of the Zionist Jews, they have a right to sue for reparations from the people who are responsible.
Indeed, if the Germans owe money to the Jewish community for the genocide perpetrated upon them, then surely the people who were behind the genocide in Armenia owe money to the descendants of the people who suffered. I mean, it seems to be, if all's fair, everybody should be entitled to the same claim, surely.
Well, that point, I think, shouldn't be missed by the Armenians as a class action. But, I mean, when you take a look at the slaughter of the Jews, and there was a slaughter of the Jews, and many of them died from starvation in work camps, but it's always seemed to me in my research that many of the Jews died because they were not willing to be participants in this Palestinian experiment. They were cosmopolitan Jews in many cases, or they were Jews who didn't want to, or their leadership didn't line up on the side of the Zionists during the founding of this stuff, so they found themselves running afoul of the Zionist movement and became expendable, and found themselves in work camps and the like. And so it seems to me that this same group actually is willing to sacrifice their own. But when you say their own, you're assuming that these people are practicing the same kind of Judaism as many of the people in Northern Europe were at that time. And what we found out is that the Sabbatian movement was not widely accepted as a Jewish movement because of the bizarre kinds of practices that they adopted, and therefore they had to hide the fact that they were Sabbatians, because the Jews that were righteous at the time found their form of Judaism to be an abomination.
Well, this is crucial, actually, now, because within the Jewish community, the Zoharites, the best way to identify the Sabbatians is also the Zoharites. The reason for that being that there are three main works. People will try and quote loads of different ways of looking at the texts which the Jews have, but there are three main works that are the basis for beliefs. They're obviously the Torah, naming the books of the Old Testament to them. There's the Talmud, the sayings of rabbis and various legal scholars throughout time. And then there's the Zohar, which is a commentary on the Kabbalistic teachings within the Talmud. That's what these three books are, in a nutshell.
And now
what Zevi did was, the Sabbatai Zevi, he was very deeply into the Lurian Kabbalah, practiced it big time, and then when he had his David Shaler moment and suddenly discovered that he was the Messiah one morning, he told everybody, hey, I'm the Messiah, and you're free of the books of the law of Moses. You're not under the laws of Moses, and you're not under the laws of the rabbis. There's just one law forward from today forward, and that's the Zohar. And you only need this book. And they publicly, both the Sabbatian and Franks, the followers of them, they had burnings, public burnings of the Torah and the Talmud, saying, we've been freed by God from these books, and now the Messiah's just given us, we just have to practice Kabbalah, and we're doing everything that's required of us, and we're free from the others. And obviously for Orthodox Jews, they were looking at this movement who hadn't accepted them and said, what are you talking about? Who's he to cancel the books of God? you see. So this movement got rejected by orthodoxy.
Didn't they try to go to Jerusalem before they went to the Caliphate, Sabbatai C, and he was rejected by the principal rabbis of the Holy Land as even being acceptable as a Jew, let alone as a Messiah.
Well, of course, back then the ethnic divide was still quite hot, and those guys were Sephardic, and he was an Ashkenazi, so they weren't going to accept him just on that basis alone. Let alone the fact that he was claiming that, you know, if they wait around till it gets icy outside, I can walk on water. You know, the whole idea of what this man was representing is in their books. Like the Neteleh to say, we're waiting for the Messiah to come, and when he comes, he will lead us into the Holy Land, and the world will be full of peace, and the Lion will lie down with the Lamb, and it will be lovely for everybody. We'll hold hands and drink Coca-Cola or something. So the whole thing is that the belief in
the Chabad or Shabbat Lubavitch. And the Lubavitch group started in the city of Lubavitch in the it's near Estonia and Latvia area in Russia, and that's where many of the leadership of this movement started out. And of course now you'll find it. Brooklyn, New York has a big following, but they've built centers around the world, and almost every major city on earth has a Lubavitch religious center. And it is practicing these, pushing these Noahide laws, which America has adopted, which European nations have adopted. In fact, Noahide laws were integrated into much of the Code of Napoleon at the time. So what you've
Education Day USA. It is on the books in America. Noahidism is on the books.
got here is a movement that has actually a lot of patience. It has its spiritual basis in some rather bizarre practices and, of course, evil in order to get what you want, or what they call it, teleological suspension of ethical principles, which means the ends justifying the means, and it's all under God in their view.
Well, for the Zoharites, one of the teachings of Zevi under the Lorian Kabbalah, what the Lorian Kabbalah brought, which the previous Kabbalah didn't have, was the left hand of God.
Yeah.
I wish there was. I wish we had the 600, almost 600 people in the room listening to this, as we did when we had, Derek Bros and what was it, Donnie Darko, and it was. This is so much more important. This is the highest level in terms of information within this community that you can ever hear. Right now, the nature, the what opposes us in terms of the enemy and their nature and their mentality and their worldview.
What it says is that all works are righteous. So, and it's actually worse than Talmudism. It's worse than the things in the Talmud. Well, this is why I'm trying to differentiate it with people. And I was trying to do this with Wake Up From Your Slumber and some of the people there. I'm trying to explain to them. A Zoharite is worse than a Talmudist. Although the Talmud is very offensive in respect of, say, Jesus and the Christians, peace be upon them, it's very unpleasant in that area. This stuff is just way off the radar. It says you can just do anything.
Right.
As long as you're undertaking the work of the left hand of God, you can rape a woman, and you're fine. It's not a problem, because you're saying this is that God created good and God created evil, and I'm enacting the evil that God has created under his left hand. So it gives them carte blanche to absolutely do anything. Worse than the Yom Kippur prayer that says, absolve me of all my sins in the year to come. At least there they're admitting they're committing sins. In this one, there are no sins.
Okay, hold on a second. This is where you get it from their teachings, where they say, embracing the evil impulse is good, for without the evil impulse, Israel could not prevail in the world. So we have them admitting on paper, in terms of doctrine, in terms of theology, that they are evil, that they use evil. And it's not a bad thing either, right? Total Machiavellian, totally zero sum. We win, you lose. We do whatever the fuck we want. That's it in a nutshell. And there is no, it's an abstract. Good and evil, you can't judge us. We're beyond reproach. Right? You're in no position to sit in judgment on us. We can do whatever we like. We can perpetrate evil. And it doesn't matter if you object. We can operate with no constraints and no boundaries. We're not tethered by morality or ethics or right and wrong. Do you see how fucking sick this is? Are you beginning to fathom the depths? I mean, there are no limits. There are no depths. You think you've seen it all. You think that Israel can't sink any lower, and you're wrong. Because every day they surprise you with even descending into lower depths. A veritable bottomless pit of evil and malevolence. We face nothing short of this. And yet, we're the bad guys. We're the bigots. We're the Jew-hating Nazis for bringing you this information, this factual, correct information, exposing their maniacal, psychopathic evil is anti-Semitic. I mean, theater of the absurd doesn't begin to describe it. Clown world, no. What in the hell? What in the hell is going on? You're asking yourself, and that's a good question to ask. What in the hell is going on here?
They do have a hand signal, do they not? And isn't it the index finger and the baby finger pointed up? And that is a Lorian hand signal, is it not?
There are reasons why they would use those kinds of signals. They've got several underground things. There are some people who even say that's an Illuminati signal, and lots of claims about it. The important thing is that they are trying to win over the Orthodox and the Reform and the liberal Jewish communities by pretending to adhere to these other books. And the strange thing is most of the Jews don't know this, and only the Neturei Karta are the ones who are standing there and saying, these people are doing the work of Satan. That's what they actually say. They say, these people are Satanists. They don't believe in God, and they don't believe in Torah, and they don't believe in the Ten Commandments, and they don't believe in the laws of Moses. They don't believe in these things, and Jews are supposed to believe in these things. And also, that although they accept the Talmud, the thing about the Neturei Karta is that they don't believe in the elements of Talmud which say that Gentiles are non-human. They actually say all of mankind will live in peace together under the Messiah, and that everybody is a human being, and that under the Messiah he will redeem everybody. This is a very generous sort of worldview. Once you get beyond that, absolutely, they say they're only half animal and this, that, and the other, and those are Talmudists. But on the far end of Orthodoxy, they won't look at the Talmud unless they absolutely have to. They say, if I can find what I need in the Torah...
That's not exactly... That's not exactly true.
My neighbor is any human being. And according to that understanding, I'm not allowed to hurt anybody. When we look in the Talmud and see what a neighbor is, it says, it's only Jews, ignore the Gentiles, they're not our neighbors. But they don't take that interpretation.
Now, you said something to me very interesting about Aleister Crowley and about Albert Pike and about the movement of this they were kind of an advance guard in the United States, moving the mindset of America into an evil kind of mindset. And if you take a look at the forces behind pornography and child sex slavery and the homosexual child sicknesses that have gone on in Washington, D.C. and in Britain, in your government and around the world, behind that you find elements within the Jewish community, but they are elements within this this Zoharist Sabbatian Jewish element. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody who's pushing the Kabbalah, which the Freemasons do, because the rites which are practiced in Freemasonic lodges are all Kabbalistic rites. That's one of the big tricks that's being played on people. You know, as the Jews moved in and took over and brought in different types of rites and put different rites in places, they became Kabbalistic rites. So the York rite stuff, which is practiced in England, is completely Christian in character. When we look at the Scottish rite and the Orient rites that go to 33 degrees, the 33 is actually a number pulled out from the number of links between the Sephiroth on the Tree of Life in the Kabbalah. And actually, each rite represents a movement up in the Kabbalah. And these people are practicing this stuff thinking it's Freemasonry, not realizing they're practicing Kabbalah.
Now, the idea of leadership in this group of Lubavitchers, they have what they call Balshams, do they not? And could you explain to the listener what a Balsham is?
Well, a Balsham is somebody who seems to have paranormal powers. We had the Balsham of in London who come over and absolutely wowed local society by, according to what the history books say, I don't know how true it is, being able to summon clouds and causal lightning and do all sorts of magical stunts, basically, and magical tricks. Whether these guys are, prestidigitators,
or hypnotists, or
as they like to call themselves,
Think David Blaine. And I think he's a tribist too, so it's perfect.
They were conjurers, or whether this stuff is real is a different matter. The point is that people witnessed these people doing these things and believed in them. And the Baal Shem movement, which is a separate movement within the Zoharites, they're the adepts of the Zohar. In theory, these are great Kabbalistic practitioners who really got to the top. And the Baal Shem was one of the founders of the whole Lubavitch movement. And when you realize that a Baal Shem started that movement, you realize that, hold on a minute, this isn't founded in the Old Testament teachings, which tell us to stay away from this kind of stuff. It's going in totally the opposite direction.
Well, you know what, Mohammed? When we take a look at all of the facts we just shared with the listening public, not all of them were in your article. What we stuck to in the article was talking about links between European Freemasonry, the links to the Jewish community within Masonry, and the Young Turk movement, and then, of course, the subsequent slaughter and complete annihilation of the cohesive Armenian community. But there's more to this story, and that's why I continued on with this discussion, because I wanted people to have the surrounding kind of knowledge so that they could maybe go further. And we will do more for them as well, but they can, knowledge is available out there to anybody who wants to work hard enough to uncover it. And the fact that you've been able to uncover many of these facts points to the idea that it's available to everyone. So I wanted everybody to get maybe a few extra ideas from this file and be able to carry the ball even further on their own. And we're going to do the same, I hope, together.
I certainly hope so, Darrell, and I hope that we can continue on, as you say, with looking at some of the other important dimensions to this, because we need to try and uncover ultimately what we're looking for is who is the hand behind this, who is controlling the secret services, the intelligence agencies of the world, who is, because that's just another tool. The Freemasonic lodges, they're just another tool. The Illuminati, the CFR, the Bilderbergers, these are just different faces, but of who? There's somebody behind these masks, and we need to try and find out who that is.
Well, I have first indication that Rothschild is at least the top or close to the top man, but certainly there are others, principals in this that have a billing with him that are certainly geopolitical billing as very high up, and then there's a spiritual element that we haven't completely uncovered. But to say that it's just Rothschild would be shorting the actual facts, and so we don't want to stop there.
Absolutely not. That would be wrong. And it would be easy to point to somebody who died 50 or 60 years ago and say, oh, it was all his fault, let's walk away from it, and there hasn't been a continuation since then. The whole point is that the Rothschild, which I name in that document, unequivocally has long since left this world, but it doesn't mean to say that the people who instigated him to support the operation have left the world, and it doesn't mean to say that the belief system that they follow has in fact changed in any way either.
Well, I want to thank you again, Mohammed. This is an extremely important bit of research that you've done today, and going through this information with you has been very enlightening, and I appreciate your time with us, as always. Ladies and gentlemen, Mohammed Ray.
Yeah, that was easily top 10 episodes of the French Connection, because it kind of breaks it down for you. Lets you know, like, like there's all kinds of surrogates, right? How are you going to implement this plan, right? You're 2% of the population, or whatever, 0.2%, whatever the fuck it is. Well, you're going to need a lot of surrogates. You're going to need a lot of foot soldiers. Yeah, Freemasonry, they're foot soldiers. Most of them don't even know what the fuck's going on, right? Only the adepts know this stuff. The higher level, whatever, high 20th degree guys to 33rd degree. And what is it, like, what did Albert Pike say? That every Mason past 30th degree should realize and understand that their God is Lucifer, right? You should know that. You should have that information from 30, 31, 32, 33 degrees, whatever. And what's with the gay shit? Oh, you get power. Remember what is it, Metatron? Enoch the Metatron was in here telling us about the gay shit. And it's not that it's gay, Bert. It's like more bisexual, because they think they're getting power from fucking sodomy. And where do you think they get that from? Where do you think they're getting that shit from, other than the Kabbalah? Oh, Kabbalah mysticism is cool, Bert. Didn't you see Tucker Carlson's fucking Kabbalah bracelet, or Madonna, or all these celebrities that just Ashton Kutcher, who's also a fucking Freemason? Oh, it tastes like matzah. What a friend we have in the Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. And what a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Thank you, Jesus. Don't be scared to call upon his name. I invoke, let's entreat the Almighty, shall we? If you want to touch the screen, I would encourage you to do so, as I try to transmit some Holy Ghost power that's coursing through my veins into yours. Lord, we ask and beseech the Creator God to cast a spell of protection upon your children, Lord, and save us and spare us and guide us and protect us from that evil Kako demon, from that God of Israel, Yahweh, and his child-raping, genocidal, chosen people, the Jews. Amen and amen. Thank you, Jesus. All right. So you guys have instead. Hold on, guys. Yeah. So that's what's going on here. Israel Shabbos Goys. Oh, okay. Hello there. Yes, I was just getting back to the fun stuff, right? Learning history, real history, is fun. It's exciting. It gives you a new perspective. You don't have to play make believe. You don't have to pretend, right? Why? Why are you still pretending? Oh, there's a lot of good reasons, right? Because it is their world. They set the fucking narrative. They set the consensus. So if you fall outside of that, you're going to be called an anti-Semite. You might be called a bigot. You might even lose your job and your banking services. You might even be an outcast and blacklisted. And depending on how far you go, put under in the 6 feet variety, right? So there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of fucking motivation or disincentive not to be involved, right? I get it. But there comes the point in someone's life, in a man's life, where are you going to go along to get along? Are you going to bullshit? Are you going to live a lie? I can't do it. I can't do it. I have to tell the truth. And let the chips fall where they may, right? Let justice be done, though the heavens fall, right? Speak truth to the devil's face. Speak truth to power, though your voice may shake. Oh, Bert, you're so courageous. You're standing up for us. We really appreciate it. Listen, I'm doing this for me because I can't live a lie. Can't do it. And I don't get it, and I don't understand how people can. But it's very profitable, right? It's very profitable to pretend. It's very lucrative to play make believe. Look at these fucking televangelists across the country. Look at the bank that they're raking in from gullible lemmings, fleecing them, shearing the sheep, as Bill Cooper would say. Right? That's what we're dealing with. I can't do that. I mean, there's good reasons. We got some people in Europe in the chat right now. You can't say this in Europe. They just put fucking a 90-something-year-old grandmother in jail for the 3rd time for a year. It's more than likely she's probably going to die in jail. More than likely. And yet, she continues to speak. They're not going to silence her. So, what am I doing here? When a German grandmother who's going to jail, who's going to spend probably the rest of her days confined, incarcerated in a German jail for daring to tell the truth, to speak the truth to the devil's face. and suffer the consequences for it. So, I mean, if that doesn't give you encouragement, if that doesn't motivate you to tell the truth, to live in your ultimate reality, then you're a fucking slave, and you're a perfect soldier of Zion. Congratulations, slave. You love your chains. You can't free everybody. There's plenty of slaves that love their chains. There's plenty of people that have made out just fine in this beast system that have a lot to lose. And rather than give up all their shiny toys and their fancy houses, right, and put those zeros in their bank account at risk, they're going to ignore. They're going to duck their head. I'm not saying you're a piece of shit. You got to be a bad guy, and you can't be wealthy and have a good life. I'm not suggesting that, but ultimately, when you're facing or put into a corner, right, in terms of, hey, what's your worldview? What do you think about Palestine? What do you think about Jewish power? Right? Well, no one on the planet can escape that conversation sooner or later. Sooner or later, you're going to have to declare, where do you stand on Palestine? Where do you stand on Jewish supremacy, disproportionate Jewish power? Where do you stand on these issues? I'm going to tell the truth. Where do you stand on good versus evil? Right? Well, like I said, I'm kind of worn out. I have a heavy schedule ahead of me, so I'm going to try to get some sleep. If you guys can help with a donation or two, that would be wonderful. You know, go on Odyssey or do a one-off on PayPal, whatever it takes. I'd like to do this full time. I'm trying to get this. I just completed 1 month of full-time spaces. 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10 hours, sometimes multiple times a day. And if for me to continue at this pace, I'm going to need your help. Anybody have anything to say? Going once, going twice. Okay. Well, guys, enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'll see you back here Monday. Same time, like 10 a.m., 11 a.m. Eastern, on the Eastern Seaboard here. So that's 3 o'clock in Europe, in Berlin, London, and Paris. That's 8 o'clock on the West Coast of America. Maybe I should I'll keep it at 10 or 11. But I appreciate everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. I'll see you on Monday. Truthers united will never be defeated or divided.
Hey, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there for more AM Joy.